Chapter 1298. The punch landed hard on the fire demon's face. Perhaps even the fire demon himself did not expect that Bufang would throw a punch at him, who was shrouded in flames, instead of dodging. The flames contained in the fire demon clan were very terrible. Although they were not as strong as the immortal fire or nether flame, they were extremely hot. Ordinary people couldn't bear it at all. Therefore, they would avoid him, who was shrouded in flames. But Bufang Rumble, the fire demon, was knocked flying away by the punch and smashed hard into the ground. He rolled and rolled, and the flames on his body seemed to dim a lot. His white hair fluttered in the wind as if emitting a proud luster. His eyes were cold and arrogant as he glanced around, stunning the nether prison experts who were cheering. The cheering came to an abrupt end at this moment. Domineering and arrogant. When the nether prison audience saw the eye through the huge projection screen in the sky, they couldn't help but tremble. His white hair fluttered in the wind. He crossed his arms over his chest and raised his chin proudly. As Zhu Yan and the others looked at Bufang's back, their wandering eyes suddenly froze. This was Owner Bu, the great demon. He was always on the road to creating miracles. The fire demon was knocked flying away by a punch. This made the experts of the nether prison camp a little frightened. This guy seems to have some tricks up his sleeves. The shadow demon expert took a deep breath. Arrogant brat. Just tear him to shreds. The horned beast tribe powerhouse bellowed insolently. Lu Yang watched from a distance. He always felt that Bufang was not ordinary. He felt that Bufang was covered with a veil, and he couldn't see him clearly. The fire demon got up from the ground. The flames all over him became lush again. How dare you hit me? His eyes turned red, and the flames all over him soared again. He opened his mouth and roared. White-haired Bufang crossed his arms over his chest, raised his chin, and looked disdainfully at the fire demon. It's just a small piece of charcoal. The host said that your charcoal is very inflated and needs to cool down. The white-haired Bufang said. Arrogant. The fire demon was furious. His hands suddenly twitched and turned into fiery palms. He formed a seal with his hands, and the flame energy in the world suddenly became restless. The fire demons had the means to manipulate the fire energy between heaven and earth. Boom! White-haired Bufang was indifferent. Around his body, flames appeared and spun rapidly. In the end, they turned into a huge fire dragon and engulfed him within. Within the fire dragon, the temperature continued to rise. The sudden increase in temperature caused the air to distort. The stones on the ground began to slowly melt and disperse under the high temperature. This is the most powerful fire-controlling technique of the fire demons. This kid has angered the fire demon. He's going to be burnt to a crisp. Although the fire demon clan ranks at the bottom of the 9 clans in Nether Prison, that's because of the limitation of their innate talent. Very few of them can reach the level of the Great Sage. At the very least, the combat ability of the fire demons is very strong among their peers. When the audience in the audience seats saw the fire dragon engulf Bufang and the scorching heat spread, they all cheered excitedly. They seemed to have seen the scene of the chef from the Heaven Chief realm being roasted to a crisp. The fire demon stood in the distance, raised his hands, and kept waving them to control the flame energy. Suddenly, his pupils constricted. There was a loud bang. The fire dragon's abdomen burst open. The next moment, white-haired Bufang's body shot out like a spring and landed in front of the fire demon. That made the fire demon's heart tremble. Boom! An arm suddenly stretched out. The arm was covered with a layer of white flame. It was the white tiger's heaven-illuminating flame. In fact, it was no longer just the heaven-illuminating flame. After all, it had fused with the immortal fire contained in Bufang. It was an immortal fire stronger than the heaven-illuminating flame. Fire? The fire demon paused. He was grabbed by the neck and slowly lifted up. I can't believe you're going to use fire to deal with me. Are you retarded? The fire demon grinned, revealing an excited smile. He really didn't expect that Bufang would use the fire demon to deal with him. Didn't he know that the experts of the fire demon clan were least afraid of fire? Break! The fire demon opened his mouth and let out a shrill roar. The next moment, the flame on his body surged and grew stronger. A suction force burst out of the fire demon, as if to swallow the white flame in Bufang's hand. White-haired Bufang's eyes narrowed slightly. He didn't stop the fire demon and let it swallow the flame. After it was completely swallowed, the fire demon's eyes widened, full of horror. No. This flame. A sizzling sound rang out. Before the fire demon could finish speaking, he found that a flame was burning in his abdomen. It was a mass of white flame. It slowly spread from his abdomen and finally covered his whole body. With a miserable howl, the fire demon disappeared completely. All that was left was a mass of dark red flame. After it was swallowed by the white flame, the fire demon died completely. All of this happened in an instant. The fire demon's teammates didn't even have time to react. The insufferably arrogant fire demon was killed. The nether prison audience was stunned. The little saint killed the fire demon? And he even swallowed the fire demon's origin flame? White-haired Bufang retracted the white flame, crossed his arms over his chest, and grinned. Feeling that the flames had grown stronger, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He raised his head and glanced at the audience. Looking around at the tens of thousands of nether prison audience, he raised his chin proudly. "None of you can fight," white-haired Bufang said. As soon as he said that, the entire arena was silent. These arrogant words were like thunder, exploding in the entire arena. Then, the audience boiled with anger. They were boiling with anger, and every nether prison expert wished they could tear him to pieces. How arrogant! This was nether prison's home ground, and only nether prison experts could be arrogant. When did a chef from the Heaven Chief realm become so arrogant? Anger burned. However, the battle continued. As soon as the fire demon died, his teammates naturally couldn't sit still. They thought that the fire demon alone was enough to kill the little saint. Now it seemed that they were too naive. The expert of the Shadow Demon clan appeared in a flash. He turned into a shadow and disappeared into the sky. When he reappeared, he was already at white-haired Bufang's side. Boom! The shadow suddenly exploded. Thousands of shadows densely covered Bufang's eyes. It was as if there were thousands of them, dazzling everyone. This was the skill of the Shadow Demon clan. However, in the face of all this, white-haired Bufang was still very calm. His sword pupils constricted slightly. The next moment, he suddenly raised his palm. With a boom, it hit a figure. The Shadow Demon clan expert froze. He didn't expect that he would be slapped out of thousands of shadows with one palm. In the distance, the experts of the Horn Demon clan and the Beastmaster clan couldn't stand it anymore. They attacked at the same time. Although their opponent was alone, they couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. The expert of the Horn Demon clan had 3 horns on his head. They were silver-gray and somewhat dazzling. He stomped his foot, and the terrible force made the ground tremble. Then, he jerked his head in Bufang's direction. The phantom of a silver horn rushed toward Bufang. The eyes of the Beastmaster clan expert were cold. He raised his hand. An array emerged. The array rotated, and 2 huge savage beasts came out of it. A ferocious aura filled the arena. Liu Yang swallowed his saliva and looked at the white-haired Bufang. Suddenly, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Rumble! The Beastmaster clan ranked 4th among the 9 clans, second only to the Overlord body. The Beastmaster clan could tame tens of thousands of beasts. As soon as the 2 enormous savage beasts appeared, the atmosphere in the arena was ignited to the extreme. They were 2 incomparably huge wolf beasts as big as mountains. Roaring, they charged toward white-haired Bufang, trying to kill Bufang. All kinds of killing methods descended at the same time, as if they wanted to push Bufang to the extreme. I told you everyone here'd is trash. The corner of white-haired Bufong's mouth twitched, and he said arrogantly. He raised his chin proudly, and in the next moment, his hands suddenly tensed up. At this moment, the white tiger, who was in charge of killing, finally showed his terror. Boom! The neck of the Shadow Demon clan expert was crushed by white-haired Bufong. He spat out blood. His broken body was thrown into the distance by white-haired Bufong. A huge silver horn rushed over. White-haired Bufong stood proudly in the sky, his body bending at a shocking angle like a spring. Then, he shot out. The energy of the silver horn's attack was smashed into pieces. White-haired Bufong's figure kept moving. In a short while, he appeared in front of the Horned Demon clan expert. The impact suddenly exploded. Hundreds of punches were thrown in a row. The silver horn of the Horned Demon clan expert was broken. A fist covered in white flames suddenly blasted out. The white flames turned into the appearance of a white tiger. A punch came down. The Horned Demon clan expert lay on the ground. The flames burned. Amid a howl, the Horned Demon clan expert turned into a huge rhinoceros. Unfortunately, the rhinoceros was already roasted. The fragrant smell of meat filled the air. The Nether Prison audience took another deep breath. They couldn't believe it. Was this chef from the Heaven Chief realm so strong? Roar! 2 wolf howls rang out. The 2 huge wolves raised their claws and slapped at white-haired Bufong. White-haired Bufong crossed his arms over his chest, his white hair fluttering in the wind. He seemed to hear a strong sound of something breaking through the air. Bufong raised his head and his pupils constricted. He opened his mouth, revealing his canine teeth. Then, he roared at the 2 wolves. A whoa! The roar was deafening, carrying the might of the white tiger. This caused the ash wolf, whose claws were about to strike down, to suddenly stiffen. The next moment, a biguang shot out. Boom! Boom! The heads of the 2 wolves exploded in an instant. The Beastmaster expert's pupils constricted, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. He never thought that their lineup was defeated in an instant. How could this chef from the Heaven Chief realm be so strong? He was just a 1 revolution little saint. How could he be so strong? Zhu Yan and the others had already been stimulated by this battle, and their blood was boiling. When the great demon was a half-step little saint, he could already fight against a first-stage little saint and even kill a second-stage little saint. To the great demon, this kind of battle was child's play. Lu Yang watched as his teammate was defeated in an instant. He was also shocked. After the white-haired Bufong killed the expert from the beast-taming sect, the beast-taming sect's disciples were all shocked. His eerie gaze suddenly turned around. It landed on his body. The pressure on his body suddenly increased. I admit defeat, Lu Yang said without hesitation. All 4 of his teammates had died, and Lu Yang understood that he was not much stronger than his teammate. Perhaps his cooking skills were very good, but it was useless. So, if he didn't admit defeat, what else could he do? As soon as Lu Yang said that he admitted defeat, the 9 revolutions little saint had already descended from the sky. There was a rumbling sound. Smoke billowed and dispersed. A terrible pressure swept across the audience. Lu Yang's legs trembled, and he sat down on the ground. In front of him was a huge fist. There was a white flame burning on the fist. However, the fist was stopped by the referee, who was a 9 revolution little saint. Fortunately, he admitted defeat quickly. Otherwise, his head might have been smashed by that punch. You've gone too far. The 9 revolutions little saint looked at Bufong with cold eyes. White-haired Bufong glanced at him and grinned, revealing his canine teeth. I told you. There's really no one who can fight. The outcome of the battle was decided in an instant. Everyone thought it would be a one-sided battle, but the tables had turned. The Earth Prison team, which should have crushed the opponent, was crushed instead. The Nether Puppet Arena was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Tens of thousands of spectators were dumbfounded at this moment. Only white-haired Bufang's arrogant words echoed in the air. There's no one who can fight. Chapter 1299. Not a single one could fight. How could this fellow dare to say such words? He's just a chef. How dare he say that? However, although the tens of thousands of Nether Prison spectators were angry when they saw the result of the battle, they couldn't say anything. That was because the outcome of the battle had greatly exceeded their expectations. In this battle, 4 of the Nether Prison's second-tier geniuses were killed. The remaining one had to admit defeat in time, and the referee had to intervene to save him. If he hadn't admitted defeat in time, that chef's punch might have directly wiped out the last genius of their second-tier team. It had always been Nether Prison killing other teams. Since when were there Nether Prison geniuses being bullied like this? This kind of feeling made the suppressed anger of the Nether Prison experts completely erupt. Especially, that guy's arrogant words were as if he didn't put anyone in his eyes at all. Not a single one could fight? Too arrogant. In the Heaven Chief realm, through the projection array, they saw the result of the battle. Everyone was cheering excitedly. The great demon was indeed the great demon, as strong as ever. Even when facing the Nether Prison geniuses, he was still the same. He was not afraid at all. He just did it. The Nether Prison experts were all kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy. Awesome! Earth Prison. Seeing the Nether Prison geniuses being beaten by Bufang, they also felt incomparably excited and happy. Their Earth Prison contestants had all died tragically at the hands of the second-tier Nether Prison team. Now, Bufang's killing seemed to have avenged them, so their hearts were naturally happy. Buzz, his white hair turned black. Bufang's eyes also became much gentler. Retracting his fist, he glanced at the referee, his face indifferent. White Tiger was very violent. Every time he attacked, it was almost a killing move. Originally, it was enough for Bufang to deal with these experts. After all, with the explosive meatball and divine seal dumpling, he could completely overturn this group of people. However, Bufang still let White Tiger attack. To put it bluntly, he was just too lazy to make a move. If White Tiger were to make a move, it might be even more direct and efficient than him. The winner of this battle is the Heaven Chief World Team. The Nether Prison judge gritted his teeth and announced the result. He stared at Bufang with a piercing gaze. Suddenly, Bufang seemed to have sensed something. He raised his head abruptly. His gaze shot out, as though it had passed through the void, and their eyes met. That gaze carried an incomparably terrifying pressure. It was the gaze of the great sage who was overseeing the arena. Was the other party dissatisfied with his unbridled behavior? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, but he retracted his gaze indifferently. Zhu Yan and the others were so excited that they almost danced with joy. They didn't know how to express their current feelings. He hadn't expected the great demon to be so domineering. Even in the face of Nether Prison experts, he was still as strong as ever. He had actually won the first match for them so easily. The group of people returned to the lounge with excitement in their hearts. This match was also the last match of the day. Tens of thousands of spectators left the arena. Some of them wailed and roared angrily. The main reason was that the result of this match was a big loss for them. Some people had put all their money into betting on the Nether Prison team's victory, but in the end, such an embarrassing result appeared. The winner was actually the Heaven Chief World, which no one was optimistic about. The match made the Nether Prison completely boil with noise and excitement. Night fell. Tomorrow would be the finals of the Netherworld's tournament of the Great Path. To everyone's surprise, they had thought that the finals would be a civil war between Nether Prison teams, but a dark horse had appeared. The Heaven Chief World, this unknown small world, which had declined for countless years, once again came into everyone's sight. Bufang and the others returned to the inn. Zhu Yan and the others were so excited that they were in no mood to sleep. At their level, sleep was actually not so necessary for them. Bufang, on the other hand, went back to his room and sat cross-legged. He began to cultivate his mental strength. The mental energy cultivation method was exchanged from the system. The first stage was divine sense, followed by divine will, and finally divine sense, which was the consciousness of a god. Different levels meant different levels of power. Just like divine perception and divine will, divine perception could sense all the changes in the surroundings, while divine will could achieve the feeling of meticulous detail. According to Bufang's calculations, if he wanted to reach the level of spiritual consciousness, it would take too long. After all, he was only at the beginner level of his spiritual force. He still needed a lot of practice to achieve great success in his spiritual force. Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. In the private room of the restaurant, several figures sat cross-legged, their faces incomparably solemn. Lu Yu sat in the private room, looked at the people beside him, and took a deep breath. Lu Yu, you called us here just to discuss the battle layout for tomorrow's finals? A young man chuckled. He looked at Lu Yu and shook his head. We are different from those fellows in the second echelon. Their defeat today was indeed unexpected, but if any one of us were to go up, we would be able to sweep them clean. Although they are in the second echelon, they are not that strong. The young man smiled faintly. Ba Wu, you're not Ba Juetian yet. You're not qualified to be so arrogant. Lu Yu glanced at Ba Wu and shook his head. His words made the young man's face change abruptly. Ba Juetian was one of the three kings, the emperor of the younger generation of the tyrant clan. He was a formidable existence comparable to Lu Ban. Although Ba Wu was also a monstrous genius of the tyrant clan, he was still a little weaker than Ba Juetian. The three kings won't appear in tomorrow's finals, so we must make sure that nothing goes wrong. If we lose, we'll lose the face of the entire nether prison, Lu Yu said. Ba Wu's face narrowed. He's just a kid from the Heaven Chief realm. If we go all out, he won't have a chance to survive. Ba Wu said coldly. Are you sure that little chef has already used his full strength? Lu Yu said. Ba Wu's eyes narrowed. That guy is just a first-stage little saint. So what if he's a first-stage little saint? Didn't he still sweep away the second echelon with a third-stage little saint? Lu Yu's face was cold. Ba Wu was speechless. All right. We'd better have a good discussion about tomorrow's match. I've fought with that kid, and his strength is indeed not as weak as it looks, Zhang Qiubai said. Carrying a bronze sword on his back, he sat in the corner of the box. As soon as Zhang Qiubai said that, Ba Wu was also speechless. Nether Prison. Di Ting Clan's land. The stone door slowly opened. A gust of dense energy suddenly gushed out from it, and streams of air surged inside. A graceful figure walked out of it, shrouded in air currents, making it difficult for people to see her face clearly. A loud creaking sound rang out. The figure suddenly stood still and did not move. Go. It's time for Nether Prison to be unified. Only when we're unified can we have a greater say in the face of those cursed enemies who will attack us again. Only then can we fight for a chance of survival. A dull voice rang out from behind the stone door. The figure wrapped in the airflow nodded solemnly. Then, she turned and walked into the distance. Nether Prison. Forbidden Land, Black Temple. A dog's paw swept across the sky and ruthlessly slammed against the wall of the Black Palace, leaving a huge paw print on the wall, causing the entire Black Palace to tremble, roar. In the Black Temple, streams of black air currents swirled out. Lord Go's fat jiggled as he floated in the void. Mangy dog. You deserve to die. In the Black Temple, a figure wrapped in black bandages emerged. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he stared at Lord Dog in the void. Old man, Lord Go, I'm just here to get back at you. I didn't see you so angry when you sneak-attacked me and that old boy Tian Song. Lord Go floated in the void with monstrous nether energy swirling around his body. Although my Black Temple is a forbidden land, The conditions offered by that old man of Nether Prison can tempt this old man. I've been paid to eliminate disasters for others. I'm just doing this for money. The voice in the Black Temple snorted coldly. I've been paid to eliminate disasters for others, Lord Go. Now, I'm just acting according to my heart, and I just want to vent my anger. The flesh on Lord Go's dog face shivered. The next moment, a dog paw expanded in the void and slapped out again. There was a loud bang. It suddenly slapped the Black Temple. You're courting death. The figure in the Black Temple was furious. However, he couldn't do anything to Lord Go in the void. Just you wait. Soon, the seal of the Forbidden Land will disappear. A new era will come. At that time, the first person I'll kill will be you, mangy dog. Roar. In the Black Temple, black energy surged, and a terrible aura soared into the sky. In the void, Lord Go turned his head and disappeared. Only his back was left, walking like a cat. The origin of the Forbidden Land has always been mysterious. They seem to be sealed by some powerful force. That old man said that the seal will disappear soon. Could it be that the powerful force is returning? Lord Go frowned and his figure suddenly shot out. There were many things he couldn't understand. Perhaps Hades Tenzang would know, but unfortunately, Hades Tenzang was already dead. Swish. Lord Go's figure tore the sky. When he appeared again, he was in the sky above Hades' palace. In Hades' palace, an old figure suddenly opened his eyes. A terrible aura soared into the sky. Yinglong grabbed the hollow eye, stepping out of Hades' palace, step by step, looking straight at Lord Go in the sky. He waved his scepter, pointing at the fat black dog in the sky. Lord Go twitched his mouth, waving his paw. Stinky dragon, Lord Go, I'm not interested in messing with you today. That kid Hades era should be coming out of the Demon King Pass soon. Lord Go, I'll wait for him to come out. I have something to ask him. Lord Go said. Each of the 18 Demon King passes left by the old Hades is a trial of life and death. Lord Hades is now breaking through the 15th pass, so he can't be disturbed. You should leave first. When Hades comes out, I'll inform you. Yinglong's white hair fluttered in the sky, looking at Lord Go indifferently. Lord Go twitched his mouth again. He suddenly landed on the roof of Hades' palace. He yawned. There's no hurry. Lord Go, wait patiently. Yinglong's face was indifferent. Suddenly Hades' palace, Demon King Pass. A sudden rumble rang out. Terrifying energy continuously leaked out from the Demon King Pass. Lord Hades, the breakthrough has begun. Yinglong's heart suddenly became excited, and his face became very complicated and nervous. Once Hades' era broke through the 18 Demon King Passes, Hades would truly have the ability to rule Earth Prison. However, if he couldn't break through, he would die in there, he would become a speck of dust. Earth Prison had been silent for too long, and Nether Prison was eyeing it covetously. It needed a real leader. Moreover, Yinglong's eyes narrowed. His heart trembled. If the prophecy left by the old Hades was right, a taboo storm was coming. Nether Prison, in an inn. Night fell. Black clouds slowly drifted over, covering the roulette-like moon. It was a dark and windy night. A figure wrapped in black fog floated in the air like a wisp of smoke, as if hiding in the darkness. It appeared in Bufang's room. The black fog swirled, concealing all sounds. A dark golden eye emerged in the darkness, flashing with a terrifying luster. Then, this figure was completely wrapped in the black fog. It slowly approached Bufang, who was sitting cross-legged on the bed. There was no killing intent, no murderous intent, no aura. Everything was done in complete silence. A near-perfect assassination was about to unfold. Chapter 1300. The Black Temple was good at assassination. In the past, its most impressive achievement was the assassination of Earth Prison's old Hades Tenzang. At that time, Tian Tsang led an army to Nether Prison and fought the great sage of the 9 clans outside the starry sky. However, The mighty Hades Tenzang was attacked by an expert of the Black Temple and was seriously injured. Then, he was ganged up on by the great sage of the 9 clans and killed. That battle made the Black Temple's reputation spread throughout Earth Prison and Nether Prison, and the Forbidden Lands came into the view of the experts because of that battle. In the past, the Forbidden Lands were very low-key. Some people didn't even know that there was a forbidden existence comparable to the Great Sage in the Forbidden Lands. That was until the Black Temple attacked and killed old Hades. That was how the secret of the Forbidden Lands became known to the public. Why did the Forbidden Lands exist? Why did they become Forbidden Lands? And who were the experts in them? These were all unsolved mysteries. This time, the expert of the Black Temple made his move. He was about to complete a perfect assassination. He had almost blind confidence in his assassination skills. His target this time was not the powerful great sage or the famous perfected little saint. He was just a chef who had just reached the realm of the First Revolution little saint. The First Revolution little saint, in the eyes of the Black Temple expert, he was no different from an ant. However, out of the integrity of an assassin, the Black Temple assassin carefully planned to carry out a perfect assassination. He wanted to kill the enemy without him knowing. Black smoke swirled in the air. Amidst the smoke, a face was revealed. It was faintly discernible, emanating an extremely terrible aura. Buzz, a dagger as thin as a cicada's wing fell into his hand. Slowly approaching, the chef's breathing was calm, and he didn't notice his approach at all. Die in peace, he thought. The corner of the Black Temple expert's mouth twitched slightly. The chef's fair neck grew larger and larger in his field of vision. The dagger, as thin as a cicada's wing, was almost hovering over the man's neck. He could behead this chef. Only then would he be able to complete the mission given by the Lord. 1, 2, 3. The assassin of the Black Temple was calculating the best time to strike with his dagger. When he counted to 3, suddenly the Black Temple assassin froze, because opposite him, Chef, who had his eyes tightly shut, suddenly opened his eyes. She looked at him calmly and peacefully, and their eyes collided. There was a moment of awkwardness in the air. The eyes of the Black Hall assassin sharpened at this moment. Die! Buzz! The dagger, which was as thin as a cicada's wing, seemed to be shaking like a cicada's wing. The next moment, it suddenly slashed toward Bufang's neck. It seemed as if it wanted to cut off Bufang's head. At this moment, Bufang felt a terrifying killing intent. This killing intent caused Bufang's drowsiness to suddenly disappear. The invincibility of the vermilion robe was unleashed at this moment. He blocked the sure-kill attack. It had to be said. This assassin was indeed amazing. Bufang almost didn't react. Who are you? Bufang furrowed his brows and asked coldly. A bird cry rang out. After the invincibility of the vermilion robe blocked that move, it instantly collapsed with a loud bang. At this moment, Bufang moved. The bandage on his arm suddenly fell apart. A bestial roar rang out. Yin and Yang Qi swirled around his fist, bringing with it a terrifying energy and aura. He suddenly threw a punch. The assassin didn't expect that he would fail. The dagger slashed horizontally, but it didn't cut off the guy's head. How is this possible? He had planned it all out. With the cultivation base of a one-revolution little saint, how could he resist his attack? However, before he had time to recover from his mistake, a voice suddenly rang out. Bufang threw a punch. This chef seemed to know that he would be unscathed. Just as the dagger was about to land on his neck, his fist was about to land on his face. So desperate? The assassin sucked in a deep breath. Boom! It was too late to dodge. Bufang's Taotai arm smashed hard on the assassin's face. Yin and Yang energy swirled, bursting out an extremely powerful aura. Boom! A loud explosion rang out. That figure was blasted out of the room by a huge force, blasting a hole in the wall of the room. The vermilion robe on Bufang turned scarlet in a flash. His face was cold. He dashed out. The flaming wings on his back flashed as he rushed out. You actually blocked my perfect assassination? An incredulous voice rang out in the void. Bufang hovered in the void, his hair fluttering as he coldly looked at the assassin hovering in the void. Who are you? Assassinate me? Did Nether Prison send you? Bufang said coldly. The assassin's assassination method made Bufang break out in a cold sweat. If he didn't have the invincibility of the vermilion robe, he might have been beheaded. Nether Prison? No. I don't care where you're from. You make me very angry, Bufang said. His mind flickered. The sleepy little who was taken out of the heaven and earth farmland by Bufang, holding him in his arms. Bufang rubbed Little Who's head. Then, he pointed at the assassin in the distance, patting Little Who's head. Little Who's eyes lit up. The two tails on its buttocks began to sway. He opened his fox mouth. Golden light continued to condense in his mouth. Ah. Da-da-da-da-da. A moment later, a surging sound exploded. Golden energy balls shot out one by one, heading straight for the assassin. Boom. 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 The assassin's figure kept moving in the void. He quickly dodged. You could dodge my first wave of assassination. It really surprised me. But it doesn't mean you don't have to die, the assassin said coldly. He was a 9-revolution little saint. Killing a first revolution little saint was a piece of cake for him. What he needed to do now was to kill this chef before the great sage of Nether Prison or the 9-revolution little saint arrived. That was his top priority. Buzz, his figure suddenly disappeared in the air. A moment later, he approached Bufang's side. However, in response, the fox opened its mouth and spat out a big ball of fire. Boom, boom, boom. One after another, energy balls exploded around his body. He opened a black energy shield to block these energy balls. The assassin was a little confused. He found that he couldn't get close to this chef. His figure moved, and a strange movement technique burst out. His figure was like a mudfish, constantly squirming in the air. The battle in the void instantly attracted the attention of many people. In the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion, a group of people, who were discussing how to deal with Bufang tomorrow, were startled, looking at the sky outside. Someone dares to fight in Sacred Puppet City? The few of them exchanged glances with each other before shooting out one after another. They rushed out of the Heavenly Fragrance Pavilion. In the distant sky, they could clearly see the scene of the battle. A young man in a scarlet chef's robe was holding a fox and constantly firing. Around the young man, there was a black shadow that was moving around using a mysterious movement technique. Is that a 9-revolution little saint? That boy with the fox seems to be the Heaven Chief? When Lu Yu and the others saw Bufang's face clearly, they took a deep breath and said incredulously. After the battle in Sacred Puppet City, Bufang actually fought with a 9-revolution little saint? That 9-revolution little saint's aura is so strange. I've never sensed it before. And his movement technique is very amazing, Zhang Qiubai commented. However, when they looked at Bufang, who was holding a fox and forcing the 9-revolution little saint to keep moving, they felt a headache coming on. They couldn't believe that the chef from the Heaven Chief realm had such king trick. They weren't the only ones. The battle naturally attracted the attention of many people in the inn. Also, it attracted the attention of the crowd below the inn. The Black Temple assassin was a little anxious. The fox's firepower made it difficult for him to get close to Bufang. They, the people of the Black Temple, were good at assassination, but they were still much weaker in a face-to-face fight. If this goes on, it will attract the attention of the city guards of Sacred Puppet City and the great sage of Nether Prison, the Black Temple expert pondered. The next moment, his figure suddenly tore through the void and flew into it. Oh! This technique is somewhat like the fighting technique of the Shadow Demon clan. No. It's more skillful than the fighting technique of the Shadow Demon clan. Zhang Qiubai and the others were talking about it. The Black Temple expert flew into the void. Bufang furrowed his brows. because his divine will had lost track of the Black Temple assassin. All of a sudden, the void behind him was torn apart. A dagger as thin as a cicada's wing slashed toward his neck. The dagger's sharp edge gave Bufang goosebumps all over his body. The elusive way of attacking made Bufang even more vigilant. Also, Bufang raised his head and looked into the distance. This kind of battle hadn't attracted the attention of the city guards or the great sage of Nether Prison. Was he purposely letting the assassin kill him? Bufang immediately guessed what the Nether Prison expert was thinking. His eyes grew colder as he twitched the corner of his mouth. The Black Temple expert, who had flown into the void and seemed to have become one with it, also thought of the same thing. Logically speaking, they should have attracted the attention of a Nether Prison great saint as soon as they made a move. But after so long, no Nether Prison expert came to deal with it. Is he indulging himself in killing this chef? It seems this chef has offended the great sage of Nether Prison. The Black Temple assassin was overjoyed. He didn't expect the Nether Prison expert to help him like this. This chef was just a first revolution little saint. At most, he had more tricks up his sleeve, and it would take him some time to kill him. Now that he had time, this chef would die for sure. Buzz, the void was torn apart again. Suddenly, it appeared behind Bufang's head and pierced it with a dagger. In the distant void, the 9 revolution little saint of Nether Prison hovered in midair, sneering at Bufang, who had shone brilliantly in the arena today. Over his head, the great sage of Nether Prison hovered. As long as the chef from the Heaven Chief realm died, His Excellency the Great Sage would strike with lightning speed and obliterate that person. Since he dared to attack in Sacred Puppet City, he naturally needed to be punished. Zhang Qiubai and the others also noticed the situation. It seems that we don't need to discuss tomorrow's battle plan. This boy might not even be able to fight tomorrow. Ba Wu crossed his arms over his chest and said with a faint smile. Lu Yu and the others looked as calm as usual. They only discussed the battle plan to make sure nothing went wrong. Zhang Qiubai, on the other hand, felt a little pity. Rumble! A beam of golden light suddenly appeared. Bufang stepped on Xiaopi's back. Xiaopi immediately burst forth with extreme speed, shuttling through the void. For a moment, the assassin who had fled into the void could not keep up with Bufang's pace. After all, the resistance in the void was so great that it was very difficult to move like in the outside world. Rumble! He gave up on fleeing into the void. The Black Temple assassin rushed out in an instant. The dagger flew into the sky, turned into 8 daggers as thin as cicada's wings, and turned into a flying wheel, sweeping toward Bufang. The wheel spun, tearing the void to pieces. Bufang's eyes were extremely cold. He raised his head. He glanced into the distance. His eyes seemed to see Zhang Qiubai and the others, as well as the 9 revolution little saint, who was hiding in the void, and the Nether Prison great sage, who was watching everything. Since that's the case, I won't hold back, Bufang said coldly. His voice was also a little cold. His mind flickered. Facing the flying wheel, Bufang's eyes suddenly became incomparably vicissitude. His originally pitch-black hair slowly fluttered in the air, covered in a layer of dark green that swept past the tip of his hair. Bufang's entire aura had undergone a monstrous change. It was as if a vast aura was spreading out. Yawning, Bufang's eyes were half open. He was very sleepy. His body floated lazily in the void. Every artifact spirit could only possess a body once a day. Since he had possessed the white tiger, he would use the black turtle this time. It just so happened that the black turtle's defense would give him enough time to take out his killer weapon. Swoosh! The flying wheel sped over. Even the void was constantly being torn apart by the slashes. Buzz! All of a sudden, a black wok appeared in the green-haired Bufang's hand. He threw the black wok up, spinning in the void. Buzz! It spun faster and faster, and the black wok grew bigger, wrapping Bufang in it. The flying wheel hit the black wok and bounced off, sending sparks everywhere. In the void, the Black Temple assassin's eyes narrowed. Then, his figure rapidly tore through the sky. Holding the dagger, he hit the black walk. The dagger fiercely slashed down, but it couldn't break the black walk. What a strong black walk! What a strong defense! Zhang Qiubai and the others couldn't help but narrow their eyes when they saw this. All of a sudden, the black walk disappeared. It turned into a small walk, floating in Bufang's hand. It was held in Bufang's palm. On Bufang's other palm, a figure appeared. It was an earthy yellow clay pot. Over the clay pot, surging sword intent suddenly spread. Bufang's dark green hair disappeared, turning back to black. He looked at the Black Temple assassin with an expressionless face. His eyes were indifferent, with a hint of madness. At this moment, it was indeed time to go crazy. Death food tool. Crazy sword pot, feel the madness. Bufang's faint voice resounded through the void like a morning bell. Chapter 1301. It was the crazy sword pot, a death food tool. Bufang's faint voice resounded through the sky and seemed to sweep through the entire city in an instant. Everyone seemed to be awakened by his voice. The Black Temple assassin did not expect that Bufang would take the initiative to fight back. How could this First Revolution little saint fight back? The gap between a First Revolution little saint and a 9 Revolution little saint was like a chasm. This was also why he was overjoyed when the experts of Sacred Puppet City didn't make a move. Once they didn't make a move, he would have enough time to kill this little chef. He would have enough time to defeat this kid. Boom! A khaki-colored clay pot floated in Bufang's hand. The lid of the pot was lifted, and a fragrance and hot air filled the air. Its brilliance was dazzling. In the pitch-black night sky, the clay pot was as resplendent as a diamond. Buzz, an invisible ripple spread out from the sword pot. The terrifying might caused everyone present to feel a wave of palpitations in their hearts. That's right, it was palpitations. It was as if something terrible was about to be released. The moment Bufang took out the sword pot, Zhang Qiubai's skin was covered with goosebumps, and his eyes were full of disbelief. He took a deep breath, and his face was full of disbelief. Because he felt the sword intent. A majestic sword intent. This sword intent might not be strong, and it could not even be compared to his own sword intent. But there was too much sword intent. It was so dense that it seemed to destroy heaven and earth. It was extremely terrifying. Under this sword intent, his sword intent was like a wisp of wave in the vast ocean. This feeling, it was incredible. That pot, it was the first time Zhang Qiubai had such a feeling. It was as if he was facing the patriarch of the Sword Demon clan. Their patriarch was the great sage. He became the great sage with his sword intent and was known as the real Sword Demon. Even the great sage of other clans did not dare to fight against him. This made his hair stand on end. This was because he had actually sensed such a feeling from a little saint who had completed his first job transition. Who did that? What kind of trick is that? How terrifying! It's like facing the great sage of our clan. My God! Could it be that this kid has been hiding his strength all along? Lu Yu and the others were already stunned. They were not fools. Feeling the sharpness in the air, they realized how terrifying Bufang's attack was this time. At this moment, the eyes of the Black Temple experts almost popped out of their sockets. Sensing the fearsomeness of the sword pot, he immediately turned around and fled. He fled decisively. He sensed the aura of death from the sword pot. Rumble! In the sky. The Sacred Puppet City's 9 Revolution little saint shot out and hovered in front of Bufang with a solemn expression. He raised his hand and stared at Bufang. Stop! The 9 Revolution little saint said coldly. The way he stared at Bufang was a little unfriendly. Was it fun watching the show? Can't sit still now? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. He glanced at the Sacred Puppet City's 9 Revolution little saint with a mocking look. His tone was filled with undisguised disdain. You didn't make a move before, but now you're here to stop me. Do you really think I'm a pushover? Bufang looked at the sacred puppet city's 9-revolution little saint, his face expressionless. I was in a hurry before. The sacred puppet city's 9-revolution little saint stared at the sword pot in Bufang's hand with fear, not daring to act presumptuously. He was afraid that Bufang would throw the pot at him. Bufang's eyes narrowed slightly. He despised the 9-revolution little saint's words even more. He raised his head and looked at the boundless void, as if he was looking into the eyes of a supreme existence. Buzz, the corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. The next moment, his eyes locked on the Black Temple assassin, who was frantically fleeing. He flicked his finger. Immediately, the khaki sword pot shot out crazily, turning into a stream of light. It completely locked on to the assassin and shot toward him. How strong was the crazy sword pot? Bufang had long wanted to see it. The sacred puppet city's little saint wanted to see him killed, and now he took out the sword pot to stop him. Did he really think that Bufang had no temper? Buzz, the Black Temple assassin's scalp went numb. His speed was fast, but the sword pot was even faster. The sword pot had completely locked onto his body. His mind trembled. The Black Temple assassin tore open the void and drilled into it, as if he had entered another dimension. The Black Temple assassin wanted to avoid being locked on by the sword pot. However, even though he had hidden in another dimension, he still felt as if his scalp was about to explode. That feeling made his hair stand on end. It was as if death had enveloped his heart. Damn it! The corner of the Black Temple assassin's mouth twitched. The sacred puppet city's 9-revolution little saint's eyes were extremely cold. You're courting death. How can my sacred puppet city tolerate your impudence? The sacred puppet city's 9-revolution little saint roared. The next moment his mind flickered. A majestic divine will swept out. Crackling sounds resounded from behind him. A sacred nether puppet emerged. The sacred nether puppet was huge, and it exuded a majestic pressure. Block it. I don't believe that. A mere 9-revolution little saint can use any powerful means. The sacred puppet city's 9-revolution little saint roared. The huge sacred nether puppet's eyes suddenly burst with light. It raised its steel arm and slapped toward the sword pot of destruction. It wanted to smash the sword pot with one slap. Boom! However, when the sacred nether puppet's palm landed on the sword pot, it caused it to tremble, and a creaking sound could be heard. The khaki-colored sword pot remained motionless. 1, 2, 3 streaks of sword chi slowly bloomed around the sword pot. They spun and bloomed, bringing with them a terrifying strangling power. A clanging sound rang out. The huge sacred nether puppet's arms were strangled and broken. Boom! The sword pot of destruction didn't slow down. It sped forward. In an instant it blew a big hole in the sacred nether puppet's chest. A bright blue sacred nether puppet's heart hung in it. The 9-revolution little saint's heart shrank. His sacred nether puppet couldn't resist the sword pot for even an instant? Boom! Then, the 9-revolution little saint shivered as if he had seen a ghost. He was so scared that he rolled and crawled, not daring to resist the sword pot. With a loud bang, the huge sacred nether puppet fell to the ground. The flaming wings on Bufang's back flapped slowly. Then, he flew out and hovered in front of the puppet. As he looked at the sacred nether puppet, there seemed to be a hint of joy in his eyes. He had finally found the sacred nether puppet's heart. Bufang's mind flickered. He communicated with the system. Then, he raised his hand. In his palm, there seemed to be a silver ball that looked like a water droplet. This was Xiao Bai's origin. Buzz. The silver water droplet emerged, constantly changing its shape in Bufang's palm. Then, it suddenly shot forward. When it hit the sacred nether puppet's heart, it was like a cat that had smelled blood. In a flash, the silver water droplet completely spread out and covered the puppet's heart. Oh! In the distance, the little saint no longer cared about his sacred nether puppet. He just wanted to run for his life. The sword pot of destruction sped all the way, following the Black Temple assassin. It moved faster and faster. Finally, it was getting closer and closer. The Black Temple assassin looked at the sword pot that was hovering over. A twisted, crazy look came over his face. He gathered all the energy in his body, turned it into a move, and threw it at the sword pot, trying to blow it up. However, unfortunately, the sword pot exploded, but it wasn't blown up by the attack. With a loud bang, not far from the Black Temple expert, the crazy sword pot exploded. The dazzling light was so dazzling that it seemed to have transformed into a blazing sun in the pitch-black night sky, illuminating the entire sacred puppet city. The bright light made everyone look up in a daze. Boom! An explosion rang out. Sword intent swept out. 1 wisp, 2 wisps, 3 wisps, thousands of sword intents swept across the sky, as if they were returning to their origin. Countless sword intents turned into a ball and wrapped the Black Temple assassin inside. Puff, the assassin from the Black Hall, didn't even have the time to utter a sound before he was killed by the terrifying sword intent. His body was drenched in blood as he slowly fell. When everyone saw that, they couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. Zhang Qiubai trembled all over. Without hesitation, he turned and sped away. Because he felt that the energy of the sword pot was constantly spreading, Buzz, Zhang Qiubai, Lu Yu, and the others all fled crazily. Before long, they were far away from this place. At this moment, the ball filled with sword intent, which had been brewing for a long time, suddenly exploded. It exploded with a bang. Thousands of sword intents were like strands of silk. Like waves of air, they spread in all directions. They were filled with terrible sword intents that seemed to be able to cut through everything. Bufang glanced at the dreadful attack that was coming at him like a wave, and his expression changed slightly. Even he couldn't resist the power of the sword pot. All of a sudden, just as Bufang was about to enter the heaven and earth farmland to hide, the silver liquid that wrapped the sacred nether puppet's heart suddenly moved. It floated in front of Bufang and turned into a huge silver wall, blocking the bombardment of the sword intents. Boom! 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 Streaks of sword intent smashed into the wall, causing mottled sword marks to appear on the wall. It was a rather ghastly sight. In the sky, an unparalleled pressure suddenly descended. A figure stepped through the air. Above his head, there seemed to be a small world floating. Above the small world, the will of the great path was faintly discernible. As soon as the figure appeared, his aura spread. He opened his hand. The palm suddenly grew bigger, as if it had turned into a world, enveloping the entire sacred puppet city. Swish, the sword will was cutting, constantly cutting that palm. Clanging sounds rang out incessantly. This was the great sage of Sacred Puppet City making a move. Of course, the great sage would not allow such a destructive method to explode in Sacred Puppet City. After an unknown period of time, the power of the sword pot slowly disappeared. The great sage's palm was already covered with mottled sword marks. Buzz, he retracted his palm. The great sage's eyes were incomparably cold. He looked straight at Bufang. Such a method could barely threaten the great sage. How could a mere one revolution little saint possess such strength? If only Nether Prison could use such a method. Xiao Bai, who had turned into a silver wall, quickly recovered. In front of Bufang, he slowly turned into a familiar figure. He had a round body, a fat belly, and a pair of mechanical eyes that glowed blue. He looked very familiar. It was still the familiar Xiao Bai. It was still the same familiar feeling. However, Xiao Bai always felt that something gave him a different feeling. Oh? A puppet? The great sage of Sacred Puppet City turned his eyes and suddenly rested them on Xiao Bai. His eyes narrowed slightly, and a look of surprise flashed through them. Xiao Bai looked like a sacred nether puppet, but he seemed to be more exquisite than an ordinary one. However, this only slightly attracted the great sage's attention. A sacred nether puppet that hadn't reached the level of the great sage naturally couldn't attract his attention. The storm of the sword pot was dealt with. The great sage's mind flickered, and his eyes fell on Bufang. He looked at Bufang coldly. Hovering next to Bufang, Xiao Bai raised his huge palm and touched his bald head. Bufang narrowed his eyes and looked at the great sage in the sky. Sacred Puppet City is a big city of my nether puppeteer clan. You should be punished for using such a method in the city. Today I'll give you a palm. If you don't die from it, I'll spare your life. The great sage looked indifferently at Bufang. His eyes were high and mighty as if he was looking at an ant. The next moment, a rumbling sound rang out. The spirit energy of heaven and earth in this world was mobilized. The great sage slowly raised one hand. His palm slapped at Bufang. In the sky, thousands of energies gathered, turning into a palm that blotted out the sky. This palm contained immense pressure and the aura of death that made people's hearts palpitate. It pressed down on Lingchen. With just one palm, the space around Bufang was completely compressed. Bufang hovered in the sky, his eyes were fixed on the great sage. In his spirit sea, the four tool spirits roared at the same time. Even the lazy black turtle opened his eyes. At this moment it seemed death was coming. Earth prison, Hades Palace. A rumbling sound rang out. Under the Hades Palace, the ground collapsed in an instant. Then, thousands of torrents surged up. The Lord Go lay on the ground, squinting at the scene. All of a sudden, the Lord Go's mind flickered, raising his dog head. The dog's eyes suddenly became extremely sharp. Those old fogies from Nether Prison would actually attack that kid Bufang? They're shameless to this extent. Then, the Lord Go raised his dog head, roaring. The dog's bark seemed to reach the sky. Rumble! The void was torn, and a huge crack appeared. The Lord Go strode his enchanting cat-like steps, stepping into it. Under the shattered Hades Palace, a wild and unrestrained laugh suddenly rang out. Mangy dog! Wait for me, I. A moment later, a black shadow instantly crossed the void, entering the crack. The crack was instantly closed. Yinglong grabbed the hollow eye. His face dumbfounded. Lord Hades had just passed the Demon King Pass, and now he was following that mangy dog? Chapter 1302. Yinglong glanced at the broken ground, which had sunk deep into the ground. Rubble rolled, leaving a cloud of dust behind. The location of the Demon King Pass was right under the Nether King Palace. Now that Nether King Ha had broken the Demon King Pass and rushed out, the ground had naturally collapsed. Of course, Hades Era could have chosen a gentler way to appear. Holding the Hollow Eye Scepter, Yinglong walked with his hands clasped behind his back in the ruins. His gray hair was hunched and his hands were clasped behind his back. When he sensed that the suppressive force in the Demon Pass had mostly disappeared, a smile came over his face. Your Excellency Tian Tsang. Little Hades has finally grown up. Yinglong's faint murmur resounded through heaven and earth. As for Hades's departure, Yinglong didn't stop him. He had said that if Hades Era could pass the 15th level of the Demon Pass, he would leave him alone. Now that Hades Era had done it, he naturally had to keep his promise. In Nether Prison, in Sacred Puppet City, a palm that blotted out the sky shocked the sun. Everyone was shocked and sucked in a cold breath. The group of people who had fled because of the crazy sword pot's explosion all turned back after seeing the great sage trap the crazy sword pot. They looked up at the figure in the sky, who was as dazzling as the sun. That was the great Saint Powerhouse who attacked, and also the great saint who was in charge of Sacred Puppet City. Now, the great sage had attacked Bufang. How could anyone below the great sage's realm resist the great sage's palm? The great sage wanted to kill Bufang. Many people took a deep breath and felt sorry for Bufang. Everyone seemed to feel that the great sage was targeting them. When the Black Temple assassins tried to kill Bufang, these experts of the Nether Puppeteer clan didn't do anything. Now, he was about to be killed by the great sage. To Bufang, this was simply too aggrieved. Bufang was not the only one who felt aggrieved. The others felt the same way and felt aggrieved. Of course, the people of Nether Prison did not think so. Bufang's battle during the day had caused countless Nether Prison people to suffer great losses. Seeing Bufang die tragically at the hands of the great sage, they couldn't help but cheer excitedly. Rumble! The great sage's palm strike was incomparably terrifying. It was as if smoke and dust had covered the sky, causing an intense clamor. Bufang's expression was extremely solemn. He looked at the palm that blotted out the sky. This was the true palm strike of a great sage. It wasn't an attack from a great sage through space, nor was it a palm strike unleashed by a great sage clone. It was the real great sage's palm strike at close range. Its power must be very terrible. No one was optimistic about Bufang. How could he survive the attack of the great sage? The 9-revolution little saint, whose sacred nether puppet was destroyed by the crazy sword pot, stared at Bufang with great excitement. His eyes were full of resentment. If it weren't for Bufang, his sacred nether puppet wouldn't have been destroyed at all. Therefore, he hated Bufang and wanted to tear Bufang apart with his own hand. However, now that the great sage had attacked, this guy would soon be turned into meat paste by the great sage's palm strike. The great sage had said that if Bufang could survive this palm strike, he wouldn't pursue the matter. It was simply impossible for a first-revolution little saint to survive the great sage's attack. This little chef would die for sure. The eyes of the Nether Puppeteer clan's great sage were cold. A palm fell from the sky. It kept bombarding Bufang. To be chased by the Black Temple. This little chef is extraordinary. Since he's extraordinary, let's kill him, the Nether Puppeteer clan's great sage thought. Bufang's aura surged. The artifact spirit in him roared. The terrible pressure made Bufang's hair flutter, and the tips of his hair even glowed coldly. Bufang raised his head and stared at the palm in the sky. He looked at the palm that blotted out the sky. Suddenly, the Nether Puppeteer clan's great sage focused his eyes and looked doubtfully at Bufang's side. Over there, the void was suddenly torn apart. Buzz, a terrifying aura was constantly bursting out from within. A lazy voice suddenly rang out. Bufang, young man. 10 spicy strips, and I will help you block this palm strike. What do you think? A familiar voice rang out. Bufang was slightly taken aback. He turned his head, looked to his side, and saw 2 figures crawling out of the torn void. The Lord Go walked slowly out of the crack with his enchanting cat-like steps. His fat jiggled slightly. As for the other figure, it was a young man who was as handsome as a banished immortal, with his chest exposed. The young man's hair fluttered, and his aura was like that of a primeval beast. Monstrous nether energy burst out of his body. Hades' era? Bufang was a little bewildered. Looking at the familiar figure, his eyes focused, and he couldn't help but ask. Because this person was Hades' era, whom he hadn't seen for a long time. Had he come out of seclusion? His aura was stronger, and so was his strength. Young man, your cultivation base is advancing really fast. Fortunately, I's talent is extraordinary, and I can rely on my father. Otherwise, you would have caught up with me. Hades' era appeared next to Bufang. Sensing the little saint's aura from Bufang, he was surprised. Boom! Rumble! In the sky, the great sage's palm slammed down. It seemed like it wasn't the right time to reminisce. Lord Go yawned, raising his paw to slap the palm in the air. However, as soon as he raised his paw, Hades' era stopped him. Enough. Since I has returned, let Bufang, young man, have a taste of I's strength. Hades' era grinned. This time, it's free. No spicy strips required. Hades' era said. A moment later, his voice was filled with excitement. Boom! A jet of nether energy shot up into the sky. His originally lazy body was instantly covered by a set of armor with clanging sounds. The clanging sounds rang out unceasingly, making his body look extremely cool. Hades's armor. An ice-cold, pitch-black armor covered the Nether King's body, making his figure look incomparably majestic. Boom! The pitch-black armor seemed to reflect brilliance. On the surface of the armor, flowing lights surged unceasingly. On the helmet of the armor, there seemed to be sharp black horns stretching out. The wings on the back of the armor spread out, and the clanging sounds rang out unceasingly. Hades' eyes suddenly became sharp. Raising his hand, he punched out fiercely towards the palm that was descending from the sky. Endless nether energy gathered in this punch. Behind him, there seemed to be a giant ghost king roaring. Boom! The fist and the palm collided. A terrible explosion rang out. Waves of air spread out, sweeping through the entire sacred puppet city. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Feeling the two powerful forces colliding, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. The Lord Ghost stared at him with his dog eyes. He looked at Hades' in surprise. He didn't expect this kid to be so strong after passing the 15th level of the Ghost King Pass. That old fellow Tian Song had left something good for Hades' had a good father. Boom, boom, boom. The explosion was dazzling. It shocked the entire sacred puppet city. Waves of pressure caused many people to lie on the ground, trembling in fear. That was the power of the great sage. Buzz in sacred puppet city, Lu Ban walked out of his room with a solemn face. Carrying the puppet on his back, his eyes were serious. Inside the inn, Ba Juetian leaned back in his chair, his face solemn. The void twisted. A figure slowly emerged from thousands of lights. It was a graceful figure, a collision at the level of the great sage. The three of them murmured at the same time. In the void, the great sage, who was standing with his hands clasped behind his back, couldn't help but narrow his eyes. What a familiar aura! Smoke and dust billowed away. The great sage's eyes were like sharp swords falling from the sky. Finally, he saw that figure clearly. Hades' clad in his Hades armor, crossed his arms over his chest, and his aura was awe-inspiring. A wicked smile hung at the corners of his mouth, and he looked high-spirited. Looking at Hades' the great sage of sacred puppet city was in a trance for a moment. He seemed to see the figure of the peerless expert who had fought against 9 enemies alone. Taking a deep breath, the look in the great sage's eyes finally changed. Hades from Earth Prison? The Hades of Earth Prison have returned? Boom! The wings on Hades' back flapped, and his body turned into a black beam of light, rushing into the sky. A black light flashed in his hand, and the Hades halberd appeared in his hand. The huge, burly, pitch-black Hades halberd swung violently. It seemed to tear the sky apart as it smashed toward the great sage. Heaven and earth seemed to rumble under this halberd. Bufang clasped his hands behind his back, looking at Hades' Lord Go's mouth twitched. The great sage of the Nether Puppeteer clan didn't dare to be careless. He roared. A beam of silver light shot up into the sky. A human-shaped puppet with patterns all over its body soared into the sky. It began to fight against Hades' Buzz, strands of spirit threads flew out of the spirit sea of the great sage of the Nether Puppeteer clan, shooting into the puppet's body. Boom, boom, boom. A great battle broke out in the blink of an eye. The terrifying battle swept across the world. Hades' who had just come out of his seclusion for the first time, needed such a hearty battle. Thus, while fighting, he screamed excitedly. The two of them tore the sky apart, fighting to the outer space. They began to fight in the starry sky. The great sage could travel through the starry sky for a short time. Fighting in the starry sky could minimize their losses. Sacred Puppet City, everyone lifted their heads in disbelief. They looked at the flickering rainbow light in the night sky. They could sense the fluctuations of a battle that seemed to come from beyond the starry sky. Everyone swallowed hard. The battle between great sages had come far beyond everyone's expectations. It seemed to be because of the little chef. Many people turned their eyes to Bufang. At the same time, they saw the dog next to Bufang. It was a fat black dog. Lu Ban, Ba Juetian, and the expert of the Di Ting clan wrapped in the rainbow light all sucked in their breath. Earth prison dog? As the three emperors of the younger generation, they naturally knew the name of Earth Prison Dog. In the war between Nether Prison and Earth Prison, this Earth Prison Dog had shown its divine might. Many people gasped when they saw the intimacy between Bufang and the Lord Go. Why is this little chef so close to Earth Prison Dog? The Lord Go glanced at the crowd. He had no interest in these Earth Prison juniors. I can't believe the great sage of Nether Prison is dealing with you personally. He is indeed shameless, the Lord Go said, glancing at Bufang. After using the sword pot, Bufang had consumed a lot of his mental force, and his face looked a little pale. He took out the 9 Revolution Path Understanding tea and poured it into his mouth. As the sweet tea poured into his mouth, the energy in it kept seeping into his body and rushing into his spirit sea. It made his hungry spirit sea recover rapidly. It made Bufang feel a little refreshed. Watching Bufang recover his mental force, the Lord Go didn't say anything. Instead, he looked at the sky in the distance with a serious expression. I heard you have a competition tomorrow. It seems you won't be able to compete this time, the Lord Go said. The patriarch of the Nether Puppeteer clan is here, the Lord Go said. In the sky, the battle had entered a white-hot stage. A moment later, a loud noise rang out. Hades Era's figure floated down from the sky, landing beside Bufang. The Hades armor disappeared, and Hades Era burst out laughing. His handsome face was full of charm. Bufang glanced at Hades Era, then waved his hand and threw a few spicy strips to him. Nether King Erha's laughter abruptly stopped. He took the spicy strip and held it in his hand. He took a deep breath, feeling the fragrance of the spicy strip spreading through his nasal cavity. His entire person became intoxicated. Then, he grabbed the spicy strip and stuffed it into his mouth, moving it in and out of his mouth. The familiar feeling of the spicy strip rubbing against his lips made Hades Era want to cry. I haven't had spicy strips for a long time, Hades Era said. In the sky, a figure with a majestic aura walked back from the starry sky, staring coldly at Hades Era. Rumble! Outside Sacred Puppet City, an even more majestic aura swept over at a rapid speed. The terrible aura seemed to crush the void. In the sky, the great sage of the Nether Puppeteer clan focused his eyes. Patriarch! He respectfully bowed toward the city. Lu Ban's mind trembled, and he also bowed respectfully toward the city. The patriarch of the Nether Puppeteer clan. He was one of the 9 strongest experts in Nether Prison. His aura made people's expressions change. Hades Era held the spicy strip between his lips. The Lord Go squinted and looked into the distance. Earth Prison Dog. Since you're here in Nether Prison, have a good chat with me, boom. His voice seemed to explode in the sky. Outside Sacred Puppet City, suddenly, a golden light burst out. The head of a huge golden puppet emerged, staring at the Lord Go through the city wall. There seemed to be energy floating in the puppet's eyes. A wave of supreme pressure suddenly dissipated. At this moment, the whole Sacred Puppet City knelt down. The Lord Go turned to look at Bufang and grinned. Bufang boy, take the people and things you want to take with you. We're going back now. Bufang paused. Then, he nodded expressionlessly. His body flickered and he appeared in the inn. After taking Zhu Yen and the others into the farmland, he returned to the side of the Lord Go. Rumble! The golden puppet's aura grew stronger and stronger. There was a figure sitting cross-legged on top of the puppet's head. Buzz, the gigantic puppet, raised its hand, and a golden palm shot towards Lord Dog's direction. Let's go. This old fellow is here, and the others are almost here. Now is not the time to settle accounts with those old fellows, the Lord Go said, grinning. Then, he opened his mouth and barked. The dog's bark seemed to roar through the heavens, bombarding everything. The next moment, His exquisite dog paw slapped out. The small and exquisite dog paw slapped towards the huge golden palm. In a flash, the two collided. At this moment, the Lord Go twisted his enchanting cat-like steps and tore the void. He stepped into it with Bufang and Hades' Era, who was smoking a spicy strip. "You want to run?" His deafening voice seemed to be filled with anger. The figure above the puppet's head suddenly disappeared, as if it had teleported. The next moment, he reappeared in front of the space crack. He grabbed at the crack in the void with his palm. It seemed he was about to catch Bufang. Bufang furrowed his brows. His mind flickered. The perishing pot and the crazy sword pot appeared in his hands at the same time. Looking at the approaching paw, Bufang's eyes narrowed. He threw the crazy sword pot and the perishing pot together. Chapter 1303. The perishing pot and the crazy sword pot were Bufang's most powerful killing means. They were both death food tools because he had added the heaven and earth farmlands will of the Great Path and the exploding gourmet array. However, Bufang had never tried to use the perishing pot and the crazy sword pot at the same time, let alone fusing them together. The fusion of the two dishes was not like mixing ordinary dishes and stir-frying them. Moreover, the energy in them had to be interconnected so that the fusion process was stable and wouldn't explode. Otherwise, once they touched each other, the perishing pot and the crazy sword pot would explode, and Bufang would be devoured into ashes in an instant. Death food utensils were extremely unstable offensive dishes. This time, Bufang made up his mind. After all, he had suffered a great loss in Sacred Puppet City, and he didn't want to let it go just like that. So, before he left, he wanted to leave a deep impression on Sacred Puppet City. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. He was the strongest expert of the Nether Puppeteer clan. His terrible aura seemed to be causing the void to collapse. His claw came with supreme power, and it kept coming as if it wanted to smash Bufang into pieces in an instant. Suddenly, Nether Puppeteer Patriarch frowned. The palm, which seemed to be shrouded in golden light, reached toward Bufang's head. He wanted to smash Bufang's head in an instant. However, he saw that the young man was looking at him fearlessly. Dishes appeared on both of his palms. One was a dried pot and the other a clay pot. What did this young man, who was just a first revolution little saint, want to do? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's heart was calm as he looked at him indifferently. Bufang's face turned pale in an instant. A serious look emerged in his eyes. Both the perishing pot and the crazy pot contained terrible energy, and when they fused together, they repelled each other. Meanwhile, Bufang's mental force surged out, enveloping the clay pot and the dried pot like strands of silk, erasing the repelling force between them. With the naked eye, the perishing pot and the crazy pot kept approaching each other. In the end, they all gathered together. The two's auras seemed to have turned into yin and yang fishes, constantly circling around each other, causing their energies to be balanced. At this stage, Bufang felt that his spiritual force was almost exhausted. "Bufang, what are you doing?" Lord Go finally sensed Bufang's abnormality. He turned his head and looked over. There was a trace of horror in his eyes as he shouted. Hades' Era was also stunned. With a spicy strip in his mouth, he stared at Bufang. Was this young man crazy? The violent energy in the clay pot and the dried pot was very strong. How could they be fused? If they fused together, they would explode. Stop! Hades' Era finally understood. He quickly pulled the chili strip out of his mouth and shouted. However, it was too late. A strange aura that they had never seen before fused together. The air seemed to be boiling. In Hades' Era and Lord Go's senses, the yin and yang fishes seemed to be about to explode. A dazzling light shone through heaven and earth. Buzz, don't be afraid. It's just to give Nether Prison a big gift. Bufang's face was pale, and beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. The corners of his mouth twitched as he calmly said. He was panting violently. The perishing pot and the crazy sword pot used the same gourmet array, but it was still so difficult to fuse them. If they were different gourmet arrays, how difficult would it be to fuse them? But now Bufang had no energy to think about that. Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's palm was approaching. Bufang grinned, his eyes flashing. His eyes flashed, and he slapped the yin-yang fishes. Instantly, a whistling sound rang out. The perishing pot and the crazy sword pot shot out and smashed toward Nether Puppeteer Patriarch. How dare a mere one revolution little saint attack me? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch narrowed his eyes in disdain. As the yin-yang fish spun, the energy within it was somewhat indistinct, although there were traces of dangerous aura spreading. However, how could the little saint, who had not gone through the first transition, pose a threat to him? Nether Puppeteer Patriarch slapped his claw at the yin-yang fish. Boom! An explosion that shook the heavens suddenly resounded. The explosion was accompanied by terrible flames and soared intent. The terrible strangling force swallowed Nether Puppeteer Patriarch in an instant. A huge mushroom cloud suddenly exploded and rushed into the sky. Billowing smoke filled the air. At this moment, the entire sacred puppet city seemed to have lost its voice. Everyone was dumbfounded as they stared at the explosion in the sky. All that was left was the terrifying rumbling that continued to sweep through the area. This was Bufang's final gift to Sacred Puppet City. Outside St. Owl City, the giant puppet moved. The gigantic palm suddenly swung over. Clasping his hands together, he wrapped the huge explosion in his palm. Some of the flames seeped through the gaps in his palms, but it was greatly weakened. Boom! Amidst the explosion, there was another one. Then, the huge sacred nether puppet's palm seemed to have broken pieces falling from it. The huge explosion was forcibly suppressed. Buzz, the palm opened. Above the golden palm stood a red-faced old man. A red-faced old man stood on it. He narrowed his eyes and stared at the void where it disappeared. His expression was as cold as water. The old man raised his hand. The sword energy had torn a gash in his palm. The flesh in the wound wriggled and quickly healed. Not even blood flowed out. The injury was not serious, but the shock in his heart was indescribable. This feeling, could it be that he is that man's inheritor? Impossible. That man had clearly fallen in the starry sky, dead and gone. There can't be an inheritor. If he is really that man's inheritor, he must die. There should not be such a person in this world. Not even one. The shock in Nether Puppeteer Patriarch's heart was far greater than the injury in his palm. Although the injury was only caused by a little saint, it was still not enough. His mind flickered. Nether Puppeteer Patriarchs will immediately spread in all directions. The whole Nether prison seemed to be restless at this moment. In the Ting clan's land, a slumbering existence slowly opened his eyes, as if there was a mysterious torrent flowing within them. The Tyrant clan. A figure burned by 5 nether flames slowly rose to his feet. His terrifying flesh and blood rumbled, and his aura seemed to collapse the void. All the patriarchs of the various clans in Nether Prison seemed to wake up at this moment. Earth Prison, the sky was torn apart. 3 figures walked out of it. The corners of Lord Go and Hades' Era's mouths twitched violently. They turned to look at Bufang, whose face was pale and bloodless, and felt a little strange. "I haven't seen you for a long time. Bufang, young man. Your temper is getting worse," Hades' Era said with a spicy strip dangling between his lips. Lord Go, on the other hand, rolled his eyes. Why bother? Although the fusion of his 2 dishes is powerful, it's far from enough to kill that old fellow. At most, it can only break his skin. It's meaningless, Lord Go said. Nether King Erha, on the other hand, nodded in agreement. By the way, isn't it inappropriate for us to bring Bufang young man back at this time? Hades' Era said. I heard that the young man has entered the finals. It's not easy. What's inappropriate about it? The people of Nether Prison are obviously up to no good. Do you think that even if Bufang Boy wins the championship, given the character of those old fellows in Nether Prison, they will let Bufang be irrigated by the will of the Great Path? Lord Go said, twitching his mouth. Those old fellows just want to use this competition to show Nether Prison's power. Once Bufang can really kill one or two of the so-called three kings, those old fellows will definitely let the great sage do it. They won't allow anyone outside Nether Prison to win the championship. Besides, if I'm not wrong, Lord Go, it seems that Nether Prison is about to make a move again. It has always wanted to promote the Netherworld into a great world, and it can't wait to do so. Especially after they see you obtain the inheritance of that old fellow, Tiant Song, they will become more and more uneasy. After all, even if there is another Tiant Song, Nether Prison will be afraid, although you are still far from your father. Lord Go said. Hades Era rolled his eyes with a spicy strip dangling between his lips. This mangy dog is really talkative recently. What should we do now? It's not easy for Bufang young man to use that move. Where are we taking him? Hades Era said. Where are we going? Lord Go paused, then the corners of his mouth twitched, revealing a strange look. We're going to a good place, Lord Go said. Hades Era paused. The next moment, Lord Go carried the three figures across the void and sped toward the distance. That direction, it was the source of the Acheron River. Damn it, mangy dog, you want me to fight with that old fool, Acheron, don't you? You want to take advantage of me? You know that old fool wants to beat me the moment he sees me. Soon, Hades Era's voice rang out in the sky. The battle was over. The sudden battle between great sages was beyond everyone's expectations. The little chef from the Heaven Chief realm had disappeared, taken away by the great sage. What about tomorrow's competition? Did this mean that the team from the Heaven Chief realm had admitted defeat? Many people looked at each other. However, the people of Nether Prison were wild with joy. The Heaven Chief realm's team admitted defeat, which meant that the champion of tomorrow's team competition would be the Nether Prison team. Nether Prison was indeed invincible. However, many Nether Prison people knew that. The reason why Bufang left was that he was forced by the Nether Prison experts. They felt a little awkward. However, this feeling quickly disappeared. Even if that chef wasn't forced to leave, did he think he could defeat the experts of the best team in Nether Prison? He probably hadn't woken up from his dream yet. On the second day, the finals officially began, and the various miniature worlds began to broadcast the competition. However, they were informed that the Heaven Chief World Team had announced their forfeiture. The quota for the Heaven Chief Tournament Team competition and individual competition was cancelled. This instantly aroused the dissatisfaction of all the people in the world. They had placed countless expectations on the dark horse of the Heaven Chief realm, but in the end it ended up like this. Many people felt that there was a conspiracy in Nether Prison, but they had no way to prove it. In the end, the Netherworld's Tournament of the Great Path had become a civil war between Nether Prison experts. The individual competition was almost exclusively between Nether Prison experts. The three kings of the younger generation finally made their moves, and they each took the top 3 places. The younger generation of Nether Prison was still trembling under the pressure of the three kings. With the end of the Netherworld's Tournament of the Great Path's individual competition, Nether Prison also sent emissaries to various small worlds. A joint operation that Nether Prison had been planning for a long time was finally about to begin. Earth Prison. In the Acheron Valley, Hades Era sat sadly on a big rock with a spicy strip dangling from his mouth, his face bruised and his nose swollen. From time to time, he would touch his nose, and there would be dark red blood flowing out of his nose. There were often tears in his eyes because he had been tricked. In the Acheron Valley, Bufang sat cross-legged in the valley for a long time. It took him 3 days in a row to barely recover his mental force. On the 4th day, Bufang opened his eyes and spread his divine will. In the valley, he came into contact with three powerful divine wills. Without a doubt, they belonged to the Lord Go, the great sage of the Acheron Valley and Hades' era. The great sage of the Acheron Valley held the grass and squinted at Bufang. When he saw that Bufang had woken up, he immediately leaned over with a kind look on his face. "Little fellow, your mental force has recovered, right? You said you would find me to brew wine when you returned from Nether Prison. Now you should fulfill your promise, right? I've prepared the grass for you." Chapter 1304. Brewing Wine. The great sage Acheron's words made Bufang slightly stunned. Then, he recovered his wit. When he went to Nether Prison, he had promised the great sage Acheron that he would use the 9-leaf Acheron grass to brew a jar of good wine. To be honest, Bufang didn't expect that he could return to Earth Prison so quickly. Slowly, he stood up. His mental force had consumed a lot, and it was a huge burden on his body. Bufang felt his whole body aching. Twisting his neck and stretching his body, Bufang squinted at the great sage Acheron. "Brewing wine, of course I can. However, I can't brew it in your valley," Bufang said. What did this kid mean? The great sage Acheron's eyes narrowed as he stared at Bufang. However, he found that Bufang didn't seem to feel guilty at all. "Your valley doesn't have any equipment. It's not a good place to brew wine," Bufang said seriously. Brewing wine, of course, wasn't just a matter of words. It required all kinds of methods. The great sage Acheron pondered. In the distance, Hades' era, whose face was swollen, and Lord Go, who was lying on the ground and was about to sleep, couldn't help but look over. "What do you want to do?" the great sage Acheron asked. "This kid shouldn't be too greedy. This great sage has even provided the precious 9-leaf Acheron grass to him. This kid can't be fooling this great sage, right?" The great sage Acheron's heart became more and more suspicious. Hades' era held a spicy strip in his mouth as he looked at Bufang. Could it be that Bufang young man wanted to take this old man to a restaurant in Heaven Chief Realm? This was not a bad idea, however. Would the great sage of Acheron leave the Acheron Valley? This old fellow would not leave the Acheron Valley just for a jar of wine, right? Bufang rubbed his chin and pondered. Then, he raised his head and looked at the great sage Acheron. "There's no hurry. Let me open a branch in hell first," Bufang said. The great sage Acheron was stunned. Lord Go and Hades' era couldn't help but widen their eyes. "Yeah. Bufang young man, you can open a branch in hell. That way, I won't have to run away." "Wonderful." Hades' era was so excited that he almost spat out the spicy strip in his mouth. Lord Go also raised his head in surprise and glanced at Bufang. "I've already figured out the location of the shop. Forbidden Soul City, which is the nearest city to here." Bufang stroked his chin and thought. "Forbidden Soul City? That won't do. It's too remote. You should open a restaurant in the most prosperous place in hell and let the whole hell know about it. With your cooking skills, Bufang young man, you deserve this honor. You deserve to reach the peak of your life. I'll help you with it right now," Hades' era said with a smile. Before Bufang could take action, Bufang shook his head and refused. "No need. If the dishes are delicious, people will come here no matter how remote it is," Bufang said. Hades paused. Bufang young man is really confident. However, he did have the capital to be so confident. 3 days later, Forbidden Soul City. A small restaurant opened in Forbidden Soul City in a low-key manner. Clatter. Bufang hung the small wooden board on the wall of the restaurant and shook his hand. You stood behind him with Little Hu in her arms, looking at Bufang curiously. Bufang told the system about the branch restaurant, and the system naturally supported it. After Bufang found a place to open a restaurant, it renovated the new restaurant for Bufang. It was a new place, a new environment, and new people. Everything was new. Of course, the layout of the restaurant made Bufang nostalgic. because the layout was the same as that of the Light Wind Empire. So when Bufang saw the layout of the Hell Restaurant for the first time, he felt as if he had returned to the Hidden Dragon continent. Of course, it was all an illusion. The rich spiritual energy in the air proved everything. If it was in the Light Wind Empire, it would be impossible to have such rich spiritual energy. The spiritual energy here was even richer than in the Heaven Chief realm. Lord Dog lay under a path understanding tree in the restaurant. This path understanding tree was covered in densely packed veined patterns. It was unknown how many veined patterns there were. But it didn't matter. You sat next to Lord Go with Little Who in her arms. Little Who squinted her eyes and enjoyed the deep sound coming from the path understanding tree. Although the path understanding tree no longer had any effect on Foxy at her level, she still enjoyed the sound very much. After eating, she went to sleep. Little Who was gradually evolving like Lord Go. Bufang named the restaurant with an easy-to-understand name. It was called Acheron's Restaurant. It was because Bufang couldn't think of a name. The opening of Acheron's Restaurant didn't attract anyone's attention. As the venue of the Netherworld's Tournament of the Great Path, Forbidden Soul City had attracted a lot of people's attention. However, as the Earth Prison team performed mediocre in the competition and was even wiped out, the spectators who came to watch the competition left. Soon, the spectators who came to watch the competition left one after another. Forbidden Soul City had become a lot more deserted now. It was not unreasonable for Hades' era to say that it was deserted. It was close to the source of the Acheron River, which was considered a relatively dangerous area, so it was normal for it to be deserted. However, Bufang didn't care too much about it. After tidying up, Bufang turned and stepped into the kitchen. Lifting the curtain of the kitchen, the tinkling of the bell rang out. Standing at the kitchen door, Xiao Bai's blue eyes flickered. Looking at Bufang, he raised his huge palm and touched his head. Looking at Xiao Bai, Bufang couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. Everything was so familiar. After patting Xiao Bai's fat belly, Bufang stepped into the kitchen. He took out a piece of papillion steak. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun, and a dragon roar rang out. With the meteor cutting technique, the papillion steak was instantly cut into pieces. Bufang broke the spirit beast egg, opened the egg, dipped the ribs in the egg, dipped them in flour, and sprinkled some spices to marinate them. After marinating for a while, he took out the black turtle constellation wok and placed it on the white tiger heaven stove. After devouring the fire demon's flame, Bufang's flame seemed to have changed a little. It was a small change, but it made Bufang feel that he could control the flame more easily. This made Bufang's eyes brighten. In his heart, he secretly remembered the special feature of the fire demon's bloodline. The wok of oil was heated up, and the hot oil instantly boiled. White foam rolled in it, and the unique smell of oil spread out. Then, he put the marinated ribs into the wok. Sizzled in the blink of an eye, white foam rose from the ribs. The moment the ribs were put into the wok, Lord Go, who was lying under the path understanding tree, became spirited. He lifted his dog head, his dog nose twitching. His eyes shone brightly. Sizzle. He fished out the ribs that had been oiled. Then, he placed them on a blue and white porcelain plate. On the other side, he poured out the oil in the wok. Xiao Bai cooperatively opened his belly, absorbing the oil. He cut the scale-tail scallion and purple garlic. Then, he put them into the wok, stir-frying them. This aroma was incomparably rich. When it entered his nose, it felt a little itchy, making him want to sneeze. Then, he put the dragon ribs into the wok and began to stir-fry. The flame suddenly surged, and the aroma of meat diffused. The rich aroma first filled the kitchen, then drifted out. Outside the restaurant, Hades' era and the great sage Acheron came together. After the fight, their relationship had eased a lot. Recently, they were talking and laughing, as if they had shortened the distance between them. Big Yellow, let me tell you. Do you know what's the most delicious thing in Bufang young man's restaurant? That's right. It's the spicy strip. It's the spicy strip I'm holding in my mouth. Don't be fooled by its ordinary appearance. You have to believe me. This spicy strip is absolutely the most delicious food in the universe. Hades' Era said to the great sage Acheron with the spicy strip in his mouth. The great sage Acheron looked at the spicy strip in Hades' Era's mouth, not believing it. What's that smell? Why does it smell so good? It was the first time the great sage Acheron had come to Bufang's restaurant. As soon as he entered the restaurant, he smelled the rich aroma. Bufang young man is cooking. Although this young man has a poker face, to be honest, his dishes are really good. Hades said. Ring. Ring, the curtain in front of the kitchen was pulled open. Bufang walked out with a plate of piping hot sweet and sour ribs. He brought the plate to the dining table. Lord Go, who was lying under the path understanding tree, suddenly became spirited. He dashed out, landing in front of the dining table. His paws rested on the table as he stuck out his tongue. He was so excited. It had been a long time since Lord Go could eat hot, delicious sweet and sour ribs again. Without the sweet and sour ribs, Lord Go had lost weight recently. Little Who also smelled the aroma. Instantly, he flew out of Yu's embrace, running to the Lord Go's side. His big, cute eyes stared at the Lord Go. There seemed to be a hint of hope in his eyes. The Lord Go wasn't happy. This is my sweet and sour ribs, which belongs to the Lord Go. Then, he stretched out his chubby paw, placing it on Little Who's head. Little Who's tail swayed wildly. His paws kept reaching forward, but he couldn't reach the sweet and sour ribs. This shameless dog is getting more and more useless. For a dish, he actually bullied a Little Who. The great sage Acheron clasped his hands, shaking his head and sneering. Yu was wearing a black dress, revealing her fair long legs. Her hair was grayish-green. It seemed that the side effect of the outbreak of the curse was hard to recover from. Yu sat at the dining table. Bufang also placed a plate of sweet and sour ribs in front of her. Without a doubt, today's dish was the sweet and sour ribs. After a long time of maintaining the sweet and sour ribs, everyone was a little nostalgic. Munch, munch. The Lord Go opened his mouth, munching on the porcelain plate. His tongue rolled wildly, biting the sweet and sour ribs on the porcelain plate. The way he ate was somewhat crazy. Little Who watched with tears in his eyes. He also wanted to eat. Since he couldn't act cute in front of the Lord Go, Little Who dashed to Yu's side. He stuck out his tongue and licked Yu's cheek, blinking his cute big eyes. Yu wasn't too stingy. She picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs stained with orange juice and put it in Little Who's mouth. Little Who opened his mouth and bit it, chewing happily. With a gulp, he swallowed it, and his eyes instantly lit up. Delicious. Hades' Era entered the restaurant, found a place, and sat down leisurely, crossing his legs. The great sage Acheron was a little uncomfortable. He hadn't left the Acheron Valley for a long time. Today was the opening of Bufang's restaurant, so he came to support it. Sweet and sour ribs? This mangy dog is really good for nothing. A plate of sweet and sour ribs made it lose its sense of direction. The great sage Acheron disdained Lord Go's table manners. After all, it was a earth prison dog, a dog with status. Couldn't it eat with more dignity? Ding-ling, Bufang walked out of the kitchen and saw the great sage Acheron. His face was expressionless. He nodded at Hades' Era and the great sage Acheron. He held a small bowl in his hand. In the small bowl, there were 3 pieces of sweet and sour ribs stained with juice. After thinking for a while, he placed the small bowl in front of the great sage Acheron and Hades' Era. I made a little more. It was originally for Little Who, but since Little Who and you enjoyed it, I'll let you have a taste. It's a big opening discount, Bufang said. The great sage Acheron rolled his eyes. Your opening discount was too cheap. Just 3 pieces of sweet and sour ribs? In the distance, Little Who was eating happily next to you, seemed to hear something. He raised his head subconsciously, but he didn't understand what was going on. He continued to move closer to you, acting cute and begging for more food. Hades' Era was very happy, grabbing his chopsticks. Oh, although I love spicy strips the most, since it's a big opening discount, I won't stand on ceremony. After saying that, Hades' Era reached out his chopsticks and picked up a piece of sweet and sour ribs, which was stained with orange juice. When he picked up the sweet and sour ribs, the juice was so thick that it seemed to be pulled into threads. He opened his mouth, and the juice seemed to be gushing out of the sweet and sour ribs. His lips were stained with the sweet and sour juice. He stuck out his tongue, sucking the juice into his mouth. Hades' Era narrowed his eyes, looking a little satisfied. Then, he chewed, slurping, slurping. The great sage Acheron looked at Hades' Era's mesmerizing manner of eating, and he couldn't help but smack his lips, swallowing his saliva. Isn't it just a bowl of ribs? I'm someone who has tasted the best wine in the abyss. I've seen all kinds of things. Big Yellow, do you want to eat? If you don't, I won't stand on ceremony. Hades' Era glanced at the reserved great sage Acheron. He immediately said. The great sage Acheron narrowed his eyes, glancing at Hades' Era. He grabbed his chopsticks. Of course, I want to taste it. After all, it's free. The great sage Acheron said to himself. While talking, he picked up the juice. The aroma of the meat lingered, making the great sage Acheron a little greedy. Perhaps it would be good? Opening his mouth, the great sage Acheron stuffed the piece of sweet and sour ribs, which was covered in juice, into his mouth. Gulp! As soon as the ribs entered his mouth, the great sage Acheron's eyes widened. Then, he turned to look at the bowl. He found that the last piece of sweet and sour ribs had been picked up by Hades' Era, who was stuffing it into his mouth. Chapter 1305. When it entered his mouth, it was a sweet and sour taste that seeped into his heart. That kind of taste made the great sage Acheron sink into it instantly. It had been a long time since he had tasted this kind of taste. It was like a taste that gushed out from the depths of his memory, making his entire body tremble. The warm taste of the intoxicating juice that flowed between his teeth caused his vision to become somewhat blurry. The muscles on his body seemed to be slightly trembling, just like the first time he had grabbed the Acheron grass. It was the first time he had held the 9-leaf Acheron grass, feeling the intoxicating feeling that flowed from the leaf. Good. Delicious. The great sage Acheron had never thought that there could be such a delicious dish. No wonder that mangy dog was so fat. If he could have this kind of delicacy every day, even if he had to gain 10 pounds of fat, he would be willing. Grabbing his chopsticks, the great sage Acheron wanted to pick up another piece of meat. However, he found that the big discount sweet and sour ribs that Bufang had mentioned had been finished. He had only eaten one piece, and the other two fell into Hades' Era's mouth. That fellow sat opposite him with his legs crossed, one hand holding the spicy strip while chewing the delicious sweet and sour ribs. He squinted his eyes, looking extremely satisfied. However, at this moment, the great sage Acheron wished that he could slap that fellow to death. Sticking out his tongue, he licked the juice on his lip. The great sage Acheron's eyes shot out a murderous light. Hades' Era was bewildered, opening his eyes in astonishment. All of a sudden, the great sage Acheron turned his head to look. He saw the Lord Go, who was gobbling down the porcelain plate in the distance. Thinking about the plump dog's porcelain plate that was full of sweet and sour ribs, his heart was filled with envy. Looking at the plump dog eating until the juice splashed everywhere, the great sage Acheron was a little envious. Perhaps this was the so-called winner in life. Bufang wiped his palms and glanced at the great sage Acheron. When he saw the latter's envious gaze, the corners of his mouth twitched. Then, he coughed lightly and pointed at the small wooden board at the door. The menu of the restaurant was written on the board. Bufang, the owner of the Earth Prison branch, didn't write too many dishes. He only wrote down the specialties. But at the end, he added that he could bring his own ingredient. This meant that the dishes of the store were quite unique. As long as one brought the ingredients, they would be able to cook. The great sage Acheron's eyes lit up. Then give me 10 plates of sweet and sour ribs first. The great sage Acheron grinned, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. He looked as silly as a lively skinny man. You can't order sweet and sour ribs today because you've already eaten it. If you want to eat it, come back tomorrow. Bufang thought for a moment and said hesitantly. The great sage Acheron was dumbfounded. You said it would be a big opening discount. Big Yellow. You can't eat sweet and sour ribs in a hurry. Bufang's face was expressionless as he said to the great sage Acheron. The great sage Acheron looked at Bufang's expressionless face. Why did he suddenly have an urge to beat him up? Big Yellow, did you bring your 9-leaf Acheron grass? Bufang looked at the great sage Acheron and asked. The great sage Acheron felt very uncomfortable at this moment. He didn't want to talk to Bufang, so he threw a blade of grass at Bufang. The 9-leaf Acheron grass was wrapped in a gentle force, floating toward Bufang. Bufang caught it in his hand. Bufang's eyes lit up. After taking the blade of grass, a wave of majestic essence energy gushed out, flowing through Bufang's body and entering Bufang's body. Bufang grabbed the Acheron grass, lifted the curtain, and went into the kitchen. Then, he returned to the kitchen. Bufang took out the 9-petal flower of helplessness. System, is the brewing method still the same? Bufang asked the system in his mind. The system was silent for a while. Then, a new message poured into Bufang's mind. A new brewing method? Bufang furrowed his brows. He carefully read the brewing method. However, as Bufang read more, he took in a breath of cold air. He found that this brewing method was really awesome. Using the will of the great path to brew wine? Is it possible? Bufang took a deep breath, furrowing his brows. He found that, at this moment, the cooking of high-grade dishes seemed to be related to the will of the great path. The will of the great path was really important to the dishes. However, according to the cultivation method of this world, the will of the great path was always important. If he wanted to become the great sage, he had to condense his own will of the great path. Perhaps the strength of the will of the great path determined the great sage's realm. Bufang rubbed his chin, contemplating. Previously, when he used the 1-leaf yellow spring grass and the 1-petal flower of helplessness to brew the yellow spring helplessness wine, he had used Yan's heavenly star catcher disc. Actually, it was also brewed using the will of the great path. Actually, the heavenly star catcher disc was the manifestation of the hidden dragon continent's will of the great path. However, now, the will of the great path was even more important. Grabbing the 9-petal Acheron grass and the flower of helplessness, Bufang entered the heaven and earth farmland. He wanted to use the will of the great path to brew good wine. The farmland's will of the great path couldn't be better. The heaven and earth farmland had a gentle breeze. Thick spirit energy was abundant. Bufang walked around the farmland, picking many immortal herbs and spiritual materials. These immortal herbs and spiritual materials could help him brew the Acheron helplessness wine. Nyo Hansan knew that Bufang had come, so he ran over. However, he was sent away by Bufang. At this moment, Bufang was thinking about how to brew wine, so he didn't have time to care about him. Nyo Hansan didn't mind. He just looked at Bufang happily. As the owner of the farmland, Bufang could naturally control the will of the great path in the farmland. Bufang closed his eyes. He could feel a vague will slowly surging in heaven and earth. With the majestic spirit energy, Bufang's cultivation base increased. The farmland's area expanded again. Originally, it was just a field, but now it had many terrains. There were mountains, rivers, valleys, and cliff. It looked more and more like a real small world. Bufang came to a mountain peak, sitting cross-legged. Bufang's divine will surged. As Bufang's divine will emerged, the myriad treasures immortal tree in the heaven and earth farmland began to sway. The 9 revolution great path tea also bloomed with radiant. The entire farmland seemed to become spirited. Buzz in the sky, a huge vortex emerged. The vortex kept surging. It seemed to have turned into a long dragon, spiraling toward Bufang. In Bufang's hand were 2 balls of light. They were the 9-leaf acheron grass and the 9-petal flower of helplessness. Inside the long dragon, there was an invisible will acting on it. In an instant the 2 shattered. They turned into a round liquid, swirling. The other immortal ingredients and immortal herbs were also smashed by Bufang. The pulverized juice fused together and quickly turned into a large ball of energy juice. Above Bufang's head, the divine will phantom emerged. It opened its eyes, floating above the liquid. Slap after slap landed on the juice, causing the juice to ripple unceasingly. The energy inside was boiling roar. The will of the great path continued to fuse into the wine as the divine will phantom figure slapped it. Inside the farmland, one by one, the spirit beasts raised their head. Nyohan-san was lying on a reclining chair, looking at Bufang, who was like a god. His eyes couldn't help but show respect. At this moment, Bufang seemed to be the real god of the farmland. Rumble! A leaf flew out of the myriad treasures heaven tree, hovering around Bufang. It was shattered, and the green liquid dripped into the liquid. The leaves of the 9-revolution heavenly path tea tree also flew out, shattered, and turned into juice that mixed with the tea. Time was ticking away slowly. The ball of energy liquid slowly turned into a green color. Its color became more and more crystal clear, as if a will was surging inside. Beads of sweat trickled down Bufang's forehead. Continuously controlling the divine will consumed a lot of his energy. When his divine will was about to be used up, instantly, Bufang poured the liquid into a porcelain jar in front of him. After covering the jar with clay, the terrifying energy disappeared. The farmland returned to normal. Bufang gently exhaled. Sitting cross-legged on the mountain peak, his eyes seemed to flicker. Holding the jar, Bufang's mind flickered, and he left the farmland. He returned to the kitchen. He opened a cupboard. This cupboard could control the passage of time. After adjusting the time, Bufang put the jar into the cupboard and set the environment. Exhausted, Bufang walked out of the kitchen. In the restaurant, Acheron, the great sage, and the others were chatting. Seeing Bufang come out, their eyes brightened. Feeling Bufang's dispirited mental state, they were a little surprised. "Is the wine ready?" "Not yet. Making wine isn't something that can be done overnight. Big Yellow, you can't drink good wine if you're impatient," Bufang said in a serious tone once again. Great Sage Acheron. To Bufang's surprise, Great Sage Acheron didn't show a look of regret. Instead, he smiled and waved his hand. "It's okay. There's no hurry. Anyway, your restaurant is here. The monk can run, but the temple can't. Besides, I've found another hobby that's just like holding grass." Great Sage Acheron said. "What hobby?" Bufang was bewildered. "Of course. The taste of sweet and sour ribs makes this saint a little intoxicated." Great Sage Acheron couldn't help but stick out his tongue and lick his lips. "Moreover, this saint has set a small goal for myself, to eat all the delicacies in your restaurant." Great Sage Acheron said. With a spicy strip dangling from his mouth, Hades' arrow winked at Bufang. There was no doubt that Great Sage Acheron had been fooled by Hades' arrow. However, Bufang was confident that his dishes wouldn't let Great Sage Acheron down. "Well, in addition to my restaurant's specialties, Big Yellow, you can also bring your own ingredients. Different ingredients can make dishes with different tastes," Bufang said. Great Sage Acheron's eyes lit up. A new restaurant appeared in Forbidden Soul City. It was very low-key, so it didn't attract many people's attention. Not many people stepped into the restaurant, either. After all, there were so many Chinese restaurants in Forbidden Soul City. Why would diners step into one of them? However, 2 or 3 days after the restaurant opened, people kept flying in and out of the restaurant's front door. Some people secretly sensed the auras of these experts. They were all shocked, and their faces changed dramatically. Because every single expert's aura was like a torrent, incomparably powerful. It's the prison overlord. Someone recognized one of the experts who went in and out of the restaurant, and his eyes widened. Many people had seen the prison overlords in the Netherworld's tournament of the Great Path. After the tournament, the prison overlords left one after another. But now, someone found that a prison overlord had appeared in a small restaurant in Forbidden Soul City? Could this restaurant belong to some mysterious power? Why did it attract a prison overlord? Many forces in Forbidden Soul City couldn't help but secretly pay attention to this restaurant. Another day passed. Outside Forbidden Soul City, an old figure walked slowly toward the restaurant with a walking stick in his hand. With a stooped back, he stepped into the restaurant. The people who were secretly paying attention to the restaurant sucked in their breath. The news spread in an instant. Because Goldhorn and Yin Jiao were standing in front of the restaurant to welcome the old man. Who was this old man? Prison Overlord Yinglong. He's the leader of the 5 prison overlords. He's the current Earth prison Hades's teacher. He's old Hades Tenzang's right-hand man. Someone recognized the old man, and the news spread in an instant. The whole Forbidden Soul City was in an uproar. Many people could not sit still anymore. The news spread to half of Earth Prison and all the major powers around Forbidden Soul City. These big powers had all sent their experts to this small restaurant. For a moment, the small restaurant seemed to have become a place of worship. Experts from all the major powers swarmed to it. However, these experts did not come for the restaurant's food, but for the diners in the restaurant. Perhaps Jin Jiao and Yin Jiao wouldn't attract the attention of these powerhouses. After all, the top experts of the major powers were not weaker than these prison overlords. But prison overlord Yinglong was different. It was not only because of Yinglong's status and power, but also because of Yinglong's strength. Prison overlord Yinglong was one of Earth Prison's great sage. When the experts from the major powers stepped into Forbidden Soul City, one by one, they headed toward the restaurant. However, when they arrived at the restaurant, they were stunned. There was a long line in front of the restaurant. The Sun family was an aristocratic family from Tiankue City, the city closest to Forbidden Soul City. Their status in Earth Prison was also very high. Now that the head of the Sun family had arrived in Forbidden Soul City, he was dumbfounded when he saw the long line. "Oh, brother, did you also come to eat in this restaurant because of its reputation?" The head of the Sun family was dumbfounded. "Eat? What the hell? Did I come all the way to Forbidden Soul City just to eat? I came to see prison overlord Yinglong." However, he dared not cause any trouble. After all, prison overlord Yinglong was in the restaurant. So, he could only wait in line and wait to enter the restaurant. In the restaurant, Great Sage Acheron, prison overlord Yinglong, and the others were sitting quietly. Great Sage Acheron, on the other hand, was holding a bowl of noodles and slurping it, his mouth dripping with oil. He had found a new hobby, and that was eating. Eating made him feel refreshed. Ting-a-ling! The bell in the kitchen rang, and the curtains were lifted. A figure slowly walked out of the kitchen, holding a porcelain jar in his hand. Many people in the restaurant fixed their eyes on them. Great Sage Acheron stopped what he was doing. Everyone looked at him in confusion. Bufang, on the other hand, let out a long breath, and his eyes flashed with excitement. "The supreme grade Acheron's helplessness is about to be opened," Bufang said. "However, before I open the altar, I still need your help." Bufang's eyes fell on Great Sage Acheron, Lord Go, Yinglong, and the others. "Help? What help?" Everyone was taken aback and slightly interested. Help me attract Earth Prison's will of the great path to irrigate the wine jar, Bufang said, the corner of his mouth curling up. Chapter 1306. What? Great Sage Acheron and the others were stunned when they heard Bufang's words. Great Sage Acheron, who was eating his noodles, almost spat them out. Attracting Earth Prison's will of the great path to irrigate. This little chef really dared to dream. Did he know how powerful Earth Prison's will of the great path was? Bufang looked at them, his face expressionless. He just looked at them quietly, not saying a word. Great Sage Acheron couldn't eat his noodles anymore. Inglong Earth Prison Overlord held the hollow eye scepter, not knowing what to say. He knew Bufang's cooking skills. He had tasted it in the Heaven Chief realm. He turned to look at you. The curse in you had been suppressed by Bufang's cooking skills. However, now, this jar of wine needed to attract Earth Prison's will of the great path to irrigate it? How could a jar of wine withstand the irrigation of this kind of power? Although they could do it, could this jar of wine withstand it? He was just a chef from the Little Saint realm. How could he think of such a thing? Lord Go stuck out his tongue with interest. Hades Era narrowed his eyes with a spicy strip in his mouth. Let Big Yellow do it. Of all the people here, Big Yellow is the most suitable. Hades Era grinned with the spicy strip in his mouth. Big Yellow was bewildered, his mouth full of noodles. Why is this saint the most suitable? Great Sage Acheron didn't know that he had such a role. Old Man Inglong's strength is a little weak. That mangy dog has been thinking about the will of the great path. I'm afraid he will be struck by lightning if he is attracted. As for me, haha, I'm too lazy. Hades Era said, crossing his legs. Great Sage Acheron was speechless. Don't you know why you can't attract it? You're just a noob in the end. Great Sage Acheron pursed his lips. If the will of the heavenly Tao of Hell is used to irrigate the wine, you can take a small jar with you for free. Let me tell you in advance, this wine is very expensive. Bufang said seriously. A small jar for free was already a huge sacrifice for Bufang. However, for the sake of the will of the great Tao of Hell, there was nothing he could do. After all, he wasn't strong enough to activate the will of the great Tao of Hell. Oh, it's a long way off. A small jar? It's not even enough for me to swallow. Great Sage Acheron pursed his lips, one gulp. Bufang narrowed his eyes and glanced at the Great Sage of Acheron. A mouthful of top-grade Acheron helplessness wine. Was this guy the wine sage? The will of the heavenly Tao of Hell, the will of the heaven and earth farmland, and the will of the Heaven Chief realm. This jug of wine contained 3 types of heaven's will. If one gulp was enough, one would be drunk to death. Bufang just twitched the corner of his mouth and glanced disdainfully at the Great Sage of Acheron. Come, give it to me. Just consider it as sacrificing yourself for this fine wine. If your wine can't satisfy me, don't be afraid of me. I'll eat until your store cries, said the Great Sage of Acheron as he stuffed the last mouthful of noodles into his mouth, wiped his mouth, and smacked his lips. Then, he took the wine jug from Bufang. As soon as he took the wine jug, he became even more doubtful. There was no strange fluctuation in the jug, as if it was just an ordinary wine jug. The Great Sage of Acheron narrowed his eyes. He glanced at Bufang suspiciously. He didn't trust Bufang more and more. After all, the wine made from the 9-leaf Acheron grass shouldn't be so ordinary. Hugging the wine jug, the Great Sage of Acheron swaggered out of the restaurant. Bufang and the others immediately followed. Outside the restaurant, a group of people who were queuing up immediately cried out in surprise. Many people were surprised to see the big shots walking out of the restaurant. However, when they saw them, they sucked in a breath of cold air. It's Earth Prison Overlord Inglong. It's really him. That guy looks like the Great Sage of Acheron? Is that His Excellency Hades? I heard that His Excellency Hades had passed the Demon King Pass. The experts of the big families in line widened their eyes, watching the big shots walking out of the restaurant. They were all stunned. When the last black dog walked out with its elegant cat-like steps, everybody was silent. Oh my God! It's the Earth Prison Dog. The Earth Prison Dog of our Earth Prison. The legendary Earth Prison Dog who fought with old Hades in Nether Prison? Seeing the Lord go appear, the crowd burst into an uproar. They thought that there was only one Earth Prison Overlord Inglong in the restaurant. In the end, a group of big shots walked out. This time, the crowd was a little confused. They had prepared gifts to meet Earth Prison Overlord Inglong, but now that there were so many big shots, they couldn't bring out their gifts. However, more people were curious about why these big shots had come out. The great sage of Acheron naturally didn't care about the crowd around him. In the eyes of the great sage, these people were just ants. There were only a few great sages in Earth Prison, and only a few of them were worthy of his attention. If Bufang didn't suit his taste, he, the great sage of Acheron, wouldn't even look at him, of course. Now, he could only follow behind Bufang. The temptation of delicious food was great. A muffled sound rang out. The porcelain jar was placed in the open space in front of the restaurant by the great sage of Acheron. He flicked his sleeve. A powerful wave of chi suddenly surged out. The group of people squeezed in front of the restaurant suddenly felt as if they were being pushed far away by an invisible force. Some people even fell to the ground on their butts, extremely dumbfounded. The cultivation of the great sage realm is to cultivate a small world, which can transform into its own will of the great path. Only when the will of the great path is completely formed can one transcend this world, the Lord Go said suddenly. Of course, he was talking to Bufang. Many people around heard it, and it was like thunder in their ears. They all sat cross-legged and listened attentively. These were the words of the Earth Prison Dog, and he was not stingy with them. Since it was the Earth Prison Dog's preaching, they naturally had to listen carefully. However, transcending is easier said than done. In fact, Ruin Prison, Earth Prison, and Nether Prison are all the same heavenly path. This heavenly path is incomparably powerful. It's much stronger than the heavenly path of the Heaven Chief realm. The Lord Go's dog face was a little heavy. This heavy look made Bufang a little dazed. The stronger the will of the great path was, the harder it was to transcend. Perhaps this was the reason why the Lord Go was depressed. It's starting, Hades Era said with a spicy strip in his mouth. Instantly, everyone's eyes fell on the great sage of Acheron. Many people were bewildered. What was the great sage of Acheron going to do? Why was he so ostentatious? All of a sudden, everyone felt an extremely terrifying aura burst out from the great sage of Acheron. This aura was like an ancient existence that had been sleeping for tens of thousands of years awakening. As soon as this aura came out, the people present were as quiet as cicadas in winter, not daring to make a sound. At this moment, the entire Earth Prison was in a complete uproar. God Vanishing Mountain. The long eyelashes of a beautiful woman wrapped in ice fluttered as she opened her eyes. There seemed to be a sharp glint bursting out of her eyes. Old Man Acheron's aura. Who is he going to fight with? In the Black Temple, a monstrous black aura surged out and turned into a human face above the Black Palace. The face had a grave expression on it. The aura of the great sage of Acheron made him quite afraid. Old Man Acheron. Is he showing off? The Cave of the Fallen Gods. The stone door of the Cave of the Fallen Gods creaked open. Majestic ghost flames gushed out. A golden skeleton walked out of it, which seemed to be wrapped in flames. There were red ghost flames burning in its eye socket. The skeleton raised its head, and the ghost flames in its eyes suddenly flashed, as if reflecting everything. As its mouth opened and closed, a mysterious voice seemed to ring out. Are you here to cause trouble? The old man hasn't used his full strength for tens of thousands of years. Why are you making such a big fuss today? Buzz, at this moment, the great sage of Acheron was like a god. His body slowly floated up. The great sage of Acheron was the oldest great sage of Earth Prison. He was so powerful that no one could see through him. Now, his aura surged, shocking everyone. The entire Earth Prison was shaking. The Acheron River surged, and the remnant souls in the river roared. Fish leaped out of the river as if they were worshipping the heavens. All the people in the Acheron River Valley knelt on the ground, looking very respectful. The great sage of Acheron clasped his hands behind his back, the corners of his mouth slightly rising. The will of the great path of Earth Prison. Ha ha. A moment later, the great sage of Acheron reached out his hand. Buzz. The big hand soared into the sky, rushing into the starry sky. After entering the starry sky, it tried to move forward, but there seemed to be an invisible barrier that stopped it. The great sage of Acheron's eyes narrowed. Then, it turned into a claw and grabbed the light curtain. He pulled it back. Rumble! The whole Earth Prison's expression changed dramatically. The sky suddenly turned pitch black, and thunderbolts roared and rumbled. Rumble! Lightning kept shooting out and bombarding the great sage of Acheron. However, the great sage of Acheron was glowing with a golden light. His body seemed to be made of real gold, and he completely resisted the terrible bombardment. The people down below were all trembling. This was the great sage. This was the strength of the top expert in this world. The real great sage could cause heaven and earth to change with a wave of his hand and a stamp of his foot. Today they finally saw him. He's a god. Around the restaurant, a group of people knelt as if they were worshipping him. The whole Forbidden Soul City was on their knees. Everyone was very excited. Meanwhile, all the Forbidden Lands had their eyes fixed on this direction. The great sage of Acheron didn't take it seriously. The sky darkened. Then, an invisible palm came slapping down toward the great sage of Acheron. This is the wrath of the will of the great path. The Lord Go said lightly. Obviously, he was very familiar with the will of the great path's tricks. Bufang glanced at the Lord Go. He was naturally familiar with this fellow who fed on the will of the great path. If I were the one who attracted the Lord Go, haha, it wouldn't be as simple as a slap. The Lord Go seemed to feel Bufang's gaze, so he rolled his eyes. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. How far has this fat dog provoked the will of the great path? In the sky, the seemingly transparent will of the great path turned into a palm and slapped down. The great sage of Acheron's robe fluttered in the wind like a god. His body took the slap head-on. The whole Acheron River surged, and the water boiled. The water of Acheron comes from the heavens. Ah! The great sage of Acheron's eyes were bright as if he could see through the sky. Then, he pulled back his hand. In the sky, a beam of light was suddenly drawn back. It was flung down hard. Thousands of streams of light scattered. Then, the beam of light smashed toward the porcelain jar. That's the will of the Tao of Hell, boy, Yang Qi said. I'll pour a single strand of it into you, but it's enough to cause an ordinary great sage's body to explode. Do you think your porcelain jar can withstand it? The great sage of Acheron said in midair, his voice resounding through the heavens. Everyone was shocked and dumbfounded. The great sage of Acheron had actually triggered Earth Prison's will of the great path. This was tantamount to stealing the secret of heaven. This old man Acheron is too bold. The supreme existences of the cave of the fallen gods and the Black Temple said indifferently. However, they continued to watch. Bufang paused. Then, he narrowed his eyes. It's fine, Bufang said. The porcelain jar was prepared by the system, and the brewing method was also given by the system. Naturally, the system could not have failed to calculate these things. All right. Here it comes. Buzz. The beam of light was suddenly drawn out by the great sage of Acheron and thrown down hard. With a boom, it smashed into the porcelain jar. At this moment, the lid of the jar, which had been sealed for a long time, was opened. As soon as the lid was opened, other wills of the great path poured out of the wine jar. The pupils of Lord Go, the great sage of Acheron, Inglong, and the others constricted, and they gasped. 3 wills of the great path. What kind of wine is Bufang making? Bufang bowed slightly, and his eyes were filled with excitement. It's about to begin, Bufang grinned. The wills of the great path of earth prison summoned by the great sage of Acheron poured into the jar. A rumbling sound rang through heaven and earth. The light was so dazzling that everyone could not help raising their hands to cover their eyes. The process lasted for a long time. Then, it slowly faded away. The light faded away. The porcelain jar returned to normal. An extremely rich aroma of wine wafted out from the wine jar. The aroma filled the air and drifted for thousands of miles. Half of the Acheron River basin seemed to be enveloped in the aroma. Swish, the aroma surged through the air. Everyone felt that their cultivation bases were about to loosen, which made many people suck in cold breaths in horror. They had such a feeling just by smelling the wine. What if they really drank the wine? Meanwhile, in Forbidden Soul City, green appeared on the dry ground. Grass grew and flowers bloomed. In a flash, the place was filled with beautiful purples and reds. As the aroma wafted through the air, hundreds of flowers bloomed. It was like the real god's nectar. Bufang focused his eyes. Just when everyone was intoxicated by the aroma of the wine, he took a step forward. His figure quickly appeared around the wine jar. The wine in the jar was spinning like a whirlpool. Bufang grabbed the lid and sealed the jar. The aroma of the wine disappeared in an instant. Everyone felt lost, and their eyes were a little dull. In God Vanishing Mountain, the beautiful woman's eyes flashed with astonishment. The great sage of Acheron stole the will of the great path just to make wine? What kind of wine was it? Why was it worth stealing the will of the great path? The beautiful woman couldn't help but feel an itch in her heart. The cave of the fallen gods and the Black Temple had the same reaction. The great sage of Acheron descended from the sky. Looking at Bufang, who was holding a jar of wine, he smiled so widely that his eyes were blooming. He kept rubbing his hands, his face full of anticipation. Bufang, my little friend, you promised to give me a small jar. Don't go back on your word. You're a dog if you don't. The great sage of Acheron said, licking his lips. In the distance, Lord Go gave him a cold look, which made the great sage of Acheron laugh dryly. Bufang glanced at the great sage of Acheron. Since he had said he would give him a jar, he would not go back on his word. So, Bufang's mind shook. A fist-sized jar of wine immediately appeared in his hand. Swish, 7-colored wine flowed out of the jar and into the fist-sized wine jar. Looking at the fist-sized jar and the huge jar in Bufang's arms, the great sage of Acheron was a little confused. Bufang, my little friend, did you take the wrong jar? This jar is a little small. Chapter 1307. The fragrance was so rich that it made people feel as if they were wandering in an ocean of wine. Buzz, this kind of charm would be intoxicating. You, holding little Who in her arms, blinked her big eyes at the same time. What an unscrupulous businessman. The supreme realm, now, that was exactly what the great sage Acheron was feeling at the moment. The jade jar was inconspicuous. A jar of wine was worth a city? This voice carried with it a terrifying energy. Looking at the huge jade jar in Bufang's arms and the wine jar in his hand, which was only the size of an adult's fist, a miserable look came over his face. Subconsciously, he glanced at Bufang. We've made a fortune. Can one transcend a tribulation like this? At this moment, everyone wanted to have a taste of it. It was already amazing that such existences gathered in a small restaurant in Forbidden Soul City. In this inconspicuous wine jar, there was wine brewed with 3 kinds of wills of the Great Path. Well, we don't lack money. Bufang looked up at the strange phenomenon in the sky. However, the corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. WTFE! The sizzling lightning punishments darted around. They rushed into the Thunder Sea Heavenly Tower. That was the reaction of the will of the Great Path when it sensed a power beyond the control of this world. You think it's too expensive? The great sage Acheron waved his hand and said with a smile. This was the precious treasure of the great sage Acheron, a treasure that he held in his hand every day. The Thunder Sea Heavenly Tower was like the residence of a god, mysterious and abstruse. The great sage Acheron subconsciously tightened his grip on the small wine jar in his arms. The group of people followed them eagerly. There seemed to be a heavenly tower in the sky, in which thousands of bolts of lightning were darting around like slithering snakes. The great sage Acheron was stunned. Bufang's mind flickered as he calmly shouted. This kid, Bufang, should have broken through the extreme realm. This jar of wine had made him step into the extreme realm of Chilan Chef. Everyone present was of noble status, but they had never heard of such an expensive wine. It actually swallowed the lightning in the sea of lightning like a whale. Although the great sage Acheron had helped to draw upon the will of the heavenly Tao of Hell, the great sage had not. Bufang took a deep breath and asked, "Is it still expensive?" Even top-grade wine from the abyss only cost a few 100,000 nether crystals per jug. Even the senile Inglong Hell Overlord came over with the hollow ice staff. Hades' era couldn't wait any longer. With a spicy strip in his mouth, he glared at Lin Fan and said, "From now on, Bufang should change his name to Bu Bai." One great sage Acheron looked at Bufang, grimaced for a while, and finally spoke. His mental fortitude was extremely high. In other words, when Bufang shouted 1,000,000 for one jug, he was still bewildered. This is the Heavenly Palace tribulation. Only the extreme realm of a certain realm can trigger this punishment. Ordinary people can't touch the extreme realm. Hugging the jade jar, he could feel the terrifying power contained in it. Boom. Rumble. This wine isn't bad at all. It can even show the strange phenomenon of the punishment. The wine aroma wafted out of the restaurant's door. Everybody outside was intoxicated. Instantly, Bufang took out a war god stick. Holding it in his hand, he stirred it. In just a moment, 7 colored radiance shot out from the wine jar, attracting everybody's eyes. A massive black vortex appeared on Xiao Bai's abdomen. In the next moment, his azure eyes emitted a starry radiance. Is that the lightning punishment? It doesn't look like it. This wine can't be tasted for free. Terrifying energy waves shook the world. Inside the restaurant, Bufang walked in with the wine jar. "I'll leave this punishment to you." Of course, when he said that, people didn't think that he was going to go bankrupt. It wasn't an exaggeration. Outside the door, the experts of the aristocratic families in Earth Prison looked at Xiao Bai, their eyes wide and their eyes small. The so-called Heavenly Palace tribulation was just a manifestation of the Great Path's will. No wonder Bufang said that he didn't lose anything, Bufang said indifferently. After saying that, he hugged the jar of wine and walked into the restaurant without looking back. That's right. The people here were all noble people. How could they be short of nether crystals? All right, I'll make an offer now. In the sky, a stifled voice echoed. Inglong Prison Overlord's dry face twitched. His senses were very clear. Bufang's eyes twinkled. His heart flickered. It was natural for the punishment to appear. In the sky, it seemed like a divine weapon was whistling. Here's 1,000,000 nether crystals. Give me a cup first. Even the first bud of the Heaven Chief Realm's Heaven Chief was already amazing. Look, there's a strange phenomenon. It was just a jar of wine. How expensive could it be? Rumble, a profiteer. Hades' era and the others were speechless. Because Bufang's cultivation base was not strong enough, the lightning punishment he triggered was not too strong, Bufang said. He's too confident. Therefore, the tribulation had locked onto him. The will of the Great Path of Earth Prison, the will of the Heaven Chief Realm, and another unknown will of the Great Path. He didn't expect that the system would set a price for this jar of wine at such a high price. When Bufang called out the price, everyone was stunned. When the wine was opened, its fragrance wafted for thousands of miles. Ordinary divine chefs couldn't make it in their entire lives. In the kitchen, that's a lot of nonsense. Under the gazes of tens of thousands of people, he charged into the Thunder Sea celestial tower in the sky, which was filled with surging thunder and lightning. Even though they had been through a lot of storms, Bufang raised his hand and patted Xiao Bai's chubby belly. They were shocked by the diners in the restaurant. That gave everyone pause again. Where's your integrity? This is not a storm. It's a hurricane. These ingredients made everyone feel incredulous. Bufang said. It was as if it was just an ordinary jar of wine. Many people couldn't help but raise their heads and look at the changes in the sky. People at their level had seen all kinds of storms and waves. When the crowd from hell saw this scene, they couldn't help but be shocked. They looked at the strange phenomenon in the sky with incomparable horror. Hades' era and the others smiled indifferently. Then, he tightly hugged the fist-sized wine jar in his hand. The Heaven Chief realm was not weaker than ordinary divine chef. Without comparison, there would be no harm. However, the crowd knew that this was definitely not an ordinary jar of wine. That stunned great sage Acheron. Moreover, it might be the best wine among the divine chef's wines. Just thinking about it made him excited and drool. Holding the wine jar carefully, Yellow Spring Great Sage looked up at the celestial palace in the sky, slightly surprised. Everyone was curious about it. The curtain was opened first, and the sound of the bell being knocked rang in everyone's ears. There was no luster in the jar. Earth Prison Dog, Great Sage Acheron, Earth Prison Overlord Inglong, and His Excellency Hades. This jar of wine was worth hundreds of millions of nether crystals. Its rainbow-like luster was shocking. Everyone was stunned. Bufang didn't say anything. He put his palm on the lid of the jar and glanced at Hades' era. Xiao Bai. At the thought of that, Great Sage Acheron grinned. Ting-a-ling. He stomped his foot on the ground, turned into a beam of light, and shot into the sky. And the result? Great Sage Acheron gave Xiao Bai a surprised look and clicked his tongue in admiration. This is the punishment presented by the will of the Great Path, Bufang said faintly, glancing at Great Sage Acheron. His Excellency Inglong said. It was normal for cooking to have a punishment, but this time it was somewhat different. The whole Earth prison had fallen into the horror of this punishment. Too little? You won't think it's too little later. His voice was completely emotionless. How magical is the wine brewed in this way? Even Hades' era couldn't help but think so at this moment. Layers of clouds rolled as if something mysterious was surging inside. However, the main brewer of this wine was still Bufang. It represented a silent tribulation. What was going on? The others couldn't help but nod. The owner of this restaurant had actually brewed a jar of wine that had touched upon the extreme realm. The people present were all people with high statuses, and all of them were focused on Bufang. All of a sudden, the metal wings on his back spread open. This chef, was he going to use this harmless puppet to resist the heavenly palace tribulation? Not to mention the 9-leaf Acheron grass, Lord Go lay under the path understanding tree, licking his exquisite dog paw. With a faint smile, he glanced at Hades' era and the others. At this moment, the Sea of Lightning was in an uproar. Watching the harmless Xiao Bai rush into the heavenly palace tribulation like a bandit, they were dumbfounded. So, for this jar of wine, I've gone bankrupt, Bufang said, his face expressionless. Prison Overlord Inglong's white hair hung loosely. He glanced at Bufang, then gently tapped the ground with the hollow eye cane in his hand. The crowd looked at Bufang and cursed him in their hearts. Didn't this guy want us to pay for it? The next moment, he gently lifted the lid of the wine jar. Bufang, young man, open the jar and let us have a taste. 1 million nether crystals for 1 cup? That's a bit too much, isn't it? This pressure seemed to come from the will of the Great Path. In other words, with a thought, a cloth bag appeared and fell on the table with a thud. The puppet was slow-witted and looked rather cute. Its eyes were azure blue, and it seemed harmless to both humans and animals. This tribulation was very unusual. Was it really reliable to let a puppet resist the lightning punishment? And it was the King Heavenly Palace tribulation that represented the extreme realm. Then, something even more shocking happened. Bufang, on the other hand, did not take it seriously. Every single one of them was a top existence in the infernal realm. After all, the wine brewed by a Chilean chef at the extreme realm would have a different flavor after going through the Heavenly Palace tribulation. Moreover, there were the young leaves of the 9-revolution Great Path tea tree. After listening to him, they couldn't help but suck in a cold breath. Bufang sighed, attracting everyone's attention. A moment later, they saw a white puppet walk out of the restaurant. The people in Earth Prison were shocked. Bufang said seriously, saying a lot of words. However, what was more shocking was, in other words, the jar of wine in Bufang's hand was equivalent to the divine chef's excellent wine. Everyone present was dumbfounded. This wine is called the Supreme Grade Acheron Helplessness Wine. The ingredients used to make it are 9-leaf acheron grass, 9-petal flower of helplessness, Heaven Chief Realm Heaven Trees Tender Leaves, 9-revolution Great Path Tea Trees Tender Leaves, the Spring of Life's Source Water, the Flame Vermilion Fruits Pulp Juice. This is the Supreme Grade Acheron Helplessness Wine. Because of its special ingredients and difficult brewing method, there is only one jar in the whole world, so it is sold by the cup. 1 cup costs 1 million nether crystals. They had all seen how the great sage Acheron had guided the will of the Great Path into the wine jar. He had 10 million nether crystals in his pocket, and he had become a millionaire just like that? This kind of wine, so, if you want to taste this wine, please pay immortal crystals or nether crystals. Consider it as supporting the fruit of my labor. As soon as Bufang entered the restaurant, Hades Era and the others followed. Boom! 1 cup of Bufang's wine cost 1 million nether crystals. A whirlpool swept out. It spread to the whole city, and the whole city was immersed in the wine's aroma. Under everyone's gaze, Xiao Bai raised his huge palm and touched his bald head. 1 cup cost 1 million nether crystals, so according to the system's habit, this jar of wine could at least hold 100 cups. 1 cup cost 1 million nether crystals. Although his jar was small, it could still hold 10 cups. But in fact, Bufang's heart was twitching. However, lying in front of Acheron's restaurant, Lord Go glanced at the lightning punishment in the sky and said indifferently. A wave of rumbling suddenly resounded. It was no longer lightning, but a terrible pressure. 3 wills of the Great Path. Just when everyone was stunned by Xiao Bai's tribulation, then, he followed behind Bufang, carefully holding the wine. The crowd was dumbfounded. This small jar is too little, Lord Go said. But you should at least give some face to the lightning punishment, right? It's a tribulation. Chapter 1308. 1 million nether crystals per cup. This wine wasn't something that ordinary people could afford to drink, but the people present weren't ordinary people. Whether it was Yinglong Prison Overlord, Acheron the Great Sage, or Hades Era, they were all extraordinary people in Earth Prison. Their identities were so noble that no one dared to offend them. Given their identities, they naturally had a lot of nether crystals. Although 1 million nether crystals was a lot, they could still afford it. In the netherworld, nether crystals were not only used as currency, but also one of the cultivation resources. The stronger one was, the more cultivation resources one would have. The nether energy contained in nether crystals was helpful for cultivation. But it was precisely because of this that nether crystals became the currency. In the ruin prison, earth prison, and nether crystals were the common currency. However, 1,000,000 nether crystals was really a lot. Many small aristocratic families could only afford to spend this much money even if they went bankrupt. Bufang took the money pouch that Yinglong prison overlord had thrown on the table. Inside the pouch was a small mountain of nether crystals. 1,000,000 nether crystals, no more, no less. Bufang gave Yinglong prison overlord a surprised look. This old man was really bold. When he said he would give the money, he did not feel the slightest bit of pain. He seems to be a wealthy prison overlord. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly as he gave Yinglong prison overlord a meaningful look. Pour me a cup of wine. 1,000,000 nether crystals for 1 cup. I've never drunk such expensive wine in my life. I'm going to have a good taste. Leaning on the hollow eye cane, Yinglong prison overlord's withered face kept twitching. Watching Bufang put away his money pouch, Yinglong prison overlord's heart was bleeding. Although he was a prison overlord, that was still his hard-earned money. Bufang didn't say anything, but his eyes narrowed. With a flip of his hand, a small blue and white porcelain wine cup appeared in his hand. The wine cup looked like a miniature version of a goblet. It was about the size of 2 thumbs and had a small goblet. The surface was painted with blue and white flowers. Bufang pinched his thumb and index finger together and pinched the blue and white porcelain goblet. His divine will surged out. With his other hand, he stretched out his index finger and gently flicked the wine jar with his divine scent. Suddenly, a trace of 7-colored liquor slowly spread out from it like a wriggling little snake. The small snake wriggled and quickly entered the blue and white porcelain cup. Whoosh! The crisp sound of the wine entering the cup was like the sound of large and small pearls falling onto a jade plate, crisp and glistening. The multicolored wine was still swirling in the cup under Bufang's guidance. The fragrant aroma of the wine was incomparably mellow, lingering in one's heart. After pouring out the wine, Bufang covered the green jade jar with its lid once again. He just held the blue and white porcelain goblet and handed it to Lord Yinglong. Everyone present was a little dumbfounded. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Indeed, with the system's character, this wine cup was indeed a little pocket-sized. However, Bufang was very confident in the wine. Lord Yinglong took the wine cup from Bufang. Looking at the liquor in the cup, his face twitched even more violently. He felt that he was really out of his mind to spend 1,000,000 nether crystals without hesitation to buy this goblet of wine the size of a booger. It wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. How could he feel happy after drinking this wine? Wasn't the purpose of drinking wine to feel happy? After drinking this goblet of wine, he felt as if there was a toothpick stuck in his heart. If it weren't for the fact that he was reluctant to spend 1,000,000 nether crystals, Lord Yinglong wished he could throw this goblet of wine in Bufang's expressionless face. Profiteer. What a big profiteer. Was it a surprise? Was it a surprise? Hades Era grinned as he looked at Lord Yinglong's pig-liver-colored face. For some reason, he felt a little happy in his heart. Looking at Yinglong's face reminded him of the first time he asked Bufang for spicy strip. At that time, he was so innocent, cute, and easy to tease. For spicy strips, he didn't even hesitate to sell his body. He even threw away his handsome face. Now Lord Yinglong, that old man, also felt the same way. Great Sage Acheron, who was standing to the side, was grinning so widely that his eyes almost disappeared. He was so happy that he couldn't help rubbing the fist-sized jade wine jar in his arms. In the future, he might have to change his hobby of holding grass. Instead, he would have to touch the wine jar. He had thought that this fist-sized wine jar could only hold about 10 goblets. However, after seeing the jade goblet, Great Sage Acheron felt that Bufang was too generous. He didn't let me down by giving him my favorite grass. Have a taste. You've paid for it. It would be a pity if you don't try it. Bufang looked at Yinglong's pained face and said seriously. These words were like an invisible arrow that pierced through Yinglong's heart with a squelch. Yinglong snorted, smashing the hollow ice staff on the ground. Thud. Then, he stared at Bufang. Grabbing the blue and white porcelain goblet, he poured the wine into his mouth. Even if it was only the size of a booger, he wanted to drink it with the heroic spirit of a big bowl. Drinking was all about heroism. Squeak. Lord Yinglong pursed his lips. His thumb and index finger pinched the goblet. His fingers curled up, and he poured all the wine in the goblet into his mouth. Boom! The moment the wine entered his mouth, Lord Yinglong's cloudy eyes widened, filled with disbelief. A goblet of wine entered his mouth. It was as if he wasn't drinking a small goblet of wine. Instead, it was the entire Acheron River. He had guts, the water of Acheron. It felt like it came from the heavens. Majestic nether chi surged into his throat. Majestic nether chi instantly surged into his limbs and bones, causing his face to turn bright red in an instant. The fragrance of the wine was rich and mellow, as if an ocean had enveloped his body, causing him to involuntarily wander in it. Yinglong felt as if he had returned to the time when he was a little naughty dragon, flapping his wings and chasing after the little female dragon next door. That was his lost youth. The long-lost youth. Plop. The Yinglong Hell Overlord narrowed his eyes and stretched his neck. The corners of his mouth curled upwards with an intoxicated expression. He drank a cup of wine. His face instantly flushed red. In the next moment, his body tilted and he fell to the ground with a thud. The void eye scepter was flung to the side, its 4 limbs flailing about. A low chuckle came from his mouth. His posture was that of a drunkard. Everyone in the restaurant widened their eyes, looking at each other in dismay. Especially the other prison overlords, they looked as if they had just seen a ghost. Looking at the fallen prison overlord Yinglong, who was giggling like a child while flailing his 4 limbs, they couldn't believe it. Was that still their boss, the stern, iron-faced Judge Yinglong Hell Overlord? He looked exactly like a drunkard. Everybody took in a breath of cold air, looking at Bufang. Bufang shrugged, showing that he was innocent. This old man's power isn't bad. I didn't expect him to have such a trashy alcohol tolerance. Bufang spread his hands. Trashy alcohol tolerance? The Yinglong Hell Overlord's alcohol tolerance was trashy? Jin Jiao, Yin Jiao, and the others didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Even if the Yinglong Hell Overlord's alcohol tolerance was low, he was still a great sage expert. Even if he drank the whole Acheron River's wine, he wouldn't get drunk. But he was as drunk as a child after drinking a glass of wine the size of a booger. Was this wine F*King poisonous? So strong. Holding the spicy strip between his lips, Nether King Air Ha sucked in a breath of cold air. Suddenly, the Yinglong Hell Overlord, who was lying on the ground, stopped moving. Instantly, energy surged out of his body. Everyone present was very familiar with this feeling. The great sage of the Acheron River narrowed his eyes. Lord Go stuck out his tongue. This old fellow is going to break through after drinking a glass of wine? Buzz. The Yinglong Hell Overlord's aura was getting stronger and stronger. Terrifying fluctuations surged. He was definitely going to break through. Lord Go pondered for a long time, then said, "This wine has 3 wills of the Great Path. It's a great tonic for the Great Sage. It can feed back the will of the Great Path in the small world the Great Sage has formed." Lord Go's analysis made everyone suck in a breath of cold air. The Great Sage of the Acheron River held the jar of wine more tightly than before. "This old fellow is drunk. I'm afraid we have to wait until he wakes up to cross the tribulation. The Great Sage's tribulation can't be transcended just by sleeping," said Lord Go. "You guys should bring Yinglong back first," Hades Era said to Gold Horn and Yin Jiao with a spicy strip in his mouth, squinting at Yinglong. The 2 of them got the order. Picking up the scepter on the ground, they carried Yinglong Hell Overlord out of the restaurant. As Gold Horn and Yin Jiao left, the news that Yinglong Hell Overlord was drunk in the restaurant spread out. The people who were watching the heavenly imperial tribulation in the sky were boiling. What? You said Inglong Hell Overlord passed out after drinking a glass of wine? He broke through after drinking a glass of wine? Inglong Hell Overlord is the great sage. At the great sage's level, breaking through each revolution is as difficult as climbing up to the sky. This wine can help the great sage break through? Isn't it a divine medicine for our little saint? The shock brought by this news was tremendous. Everybody was shaken. For a moment, the people who were watching the tribulation in the sky shifted their attention to the restaurant. They craved this fine wine even more. Since it could help one break through, this fine wine was enough to make people crazy. It was especially so for the experts who had reached the bottleneck and were about to reach the end of their life. This kind of wine was a divine medicine that they yearned for even in their dreams. In the restaurant, at this moment, their breaths were short. With a spicy strip in his mouth, Hades Era threw out a money pouch. Earth Prison was Hades Era's home field. In this place, he had many nether crystals. After all, he was the Hades of Earth Prison, and it would be shameful for him to go out poor. 1,000,000 nether crystals. Bufang young man, give I a glass of wine. I've been thirsty for a long time. Hades Era said impatiently with a spicy strip in his mouth. He happily received Hades Era's money pouch. Bufang nodded, his face expressionless. Then, he took out a small porcelain cup and poured the wine into it. A strong aroma of wine wafted out again. Inside and outside the restaurant, the people were all intoxicated by the aroma of wine. 1 glass of wine was not much. The aroma was strong and very charming. The people waiting in line at the door crowded together, craning their necks to look at Hades Era. Or rather, they were staring at the glass of wine in Hades Era's hand. Was this wine really so magical? Could it help the great sage break through? It all depended on this moment. Whether it was a coincidence that Inglong Earth Prison Overlord had broken through after drinking it or it was really the effect of the wine, it all depended on this moment. He took a deep breath. With the spicy strip in his mouth, Hades Era was intoxicated. Sizzle. He gulped down the glass of wine. Swish. As soon as the wine entered his stomach, it rushed into his throat like a torrent. It was as if the Acheron River was running in his throat. This feeling made Hades Era's body tremble. The chilly strip in his mouth uncontrollably fell from his mouth, falling to the ground with a plop. Hades Era mechanically moved his neck. He glanced at the spicy strip on the ground, reached out his hand, and grabbed it. However, he found that the spicy strip in front of him was blurring. 1 chilly strip turned into 2 strips, and 2 strips turned into 4 strips. Oh, after drinking wine, the number of spicy strips could increase? Hades Era's handsome face instantly flushed. He grinned. The crowd looked at each other in dismay. What the hell? Thud. Another muffled thud echoed. Hades Era slumped to the ground. Spicy strips. So many spicy strips. I also have a big bundle of spicy strips. I have endless spicy strips. Bufang young man, I have a lot of spicy strips. You stinky boy, you can't cut eyes spicy strips anymore. Hades Era fell to the ground, reaching out to grab the air, grinning foolishly. Bufang's mouth twitched coldly. He glanced at Nether King Erha, who was lying on the ground. Wine spilled the truth. It seemed Era didn't like him. Bufang squinted. Yuji and Luoji's mouths twitched. Without a doubt, Hades Era was like Inglong Earth Prison Overlord. After drinking a glass of wine, he was so drunk that he started to hallucinate. Of course, the most important thing was to sense the change in Sir Hades's aura. Everyone didn't care about Sir Hades's sleep-talking. They began to pay attention to the change in his aura. Buzz indeed. Hades Era's aura suddenly boiled. His cultivation base, which had just broken through, was soaring. He broke through? Oh my God! It's not a coincidence. This wine is heaven-defying. After drinking a glass of wine, He has a 100% chance of breaking through? Everyone was shocked, sucking in a breath of cold air. Hades' era was now the great sage. Moreover, he had just broken through. It should be hard for him to break through in a short time. However, after drinking a glass of wine, his aura boiled, and the will of the great path in the three liquids began to change. This was simply, it would shock the entire Earth prison. Crazy. Everyone was crazy. The crowd at the entrance crazily tried to squeeze through the door. Bufang faintly glanced at the noisy crowd outside. Line up properly. Troublemakers will bear the consequences. As soon as he finished speaking, heavy footsteps sounded from outside the door. Xiaobai walked through the door. Electric arcs danced around his body, and his fan-like hand held a golden lightning saber. His aura was majestic. Also, the top-grade Acheron of helplessness. 1 glass for 1,000,000 nether crystals. If you have enough money, line up. If you don't, turn around. Bufang continued. This time, his words bewildered everyone present. They could even hear a pin drop. 1,000,000 for 1 glass? Why don't you go to heaven? Lord Go strode with his enchanting cat-like steps, walking to Hades' era. His exquisite dog paw reached out, groping Hades' era's body, who was lying on the ground. Shortly after, he found a pouch of money. His dog paw tossed it up and down. After a while, he grinned. As Luoji, Yuji, and the others dropped their jaws, he threw the pouch of money to Bufang. Bufang kid, give Lord Go a glass. Let's see if this wine can help Lord Go break through. Lord Go said. The great sage Acheron and the others were bewildered. Then, their breaths quickened. With Lord Go's cultivation base, if it could help Lord Go break through, this wine would be heaven-defying. Chapter 1309. Help the Lord Go break through? The Lord Go's gentle and magnetic voice resounded in the restaurant. Everybody was bewildered. They took a deep breath, looking at the Lord Go in silence. Could this cup of wine help the Lord Go break through? The great sage Acheron's eyes shrank. He had just thought of such an important matter, and his breathing quickened. If this wine could help the mangy dog break through, could he do it too? If the mangy dog's realm could break through, wouldn't he be able to touch that realm? Oh my God! The great sage Acheron was excited just thinking about it. Bufang was bewildered. His heart was moved. If the Lord Go could break through, he would reach an extremely terrifying realm. Hence, when the Lord Go urged him, Bufang didn't hesitate. He directly opened the lid of the wine jar. The fragrance of the wine spread out from thousands of miles away, enveloping the entire area, causing everyone to fall into an intoxicated state. Whether this wine could help the great sage break through or not, the aroma alone was worth tasting. Swish! Bufang crooked his finger. The 7-colored wine flew out of the jar, coiling into the wine cup like a small snake. The rich aroma and the smell of wine spread out. The Lord Go stuck out his tongue, his eyes a little excited. This wine was the second thing that made him excited besides the sweet and sour ribs. Drink, drink. Don't stand on ceremony. The great sage Acheron hurriedly urged. You and the others also widened their eyes, looking forward to it curiously. Bufang handed the wine cup to the Lord Go. The Lord Go narrowed his eyes. His mental force surged out, holding the wine jar. Looking at the wine in the jar, the dog's nose twitched. It sniffed and a strange expression appeared on its face. He stuck out his tongue, licking his lips. Then, a crashing sound could be heard. The wine cup was tipped over, and a small snake-like wine slithered out of it and quickly entered the Lord Go's mouth. The Lord Go opened his mouth, revealing his sharp canine teeth. Gulp! As soon as the liquor entered his mouth, Lord Go immediately swallowed it. Whoosh! Everyone seemed to have heard the sound of a waterfall and were instantly dumbfounded. Wasn't it just a small strip of wine? How could he drink the feeling of a waterfall flowing straight down? Great sage Acheron hugged the wine jar and stared at Lord Go. Not only him, but everyone in the restaurant also stared at Lord Go. They were all curious. If the Hell Dog could break through after drinking the wine, how strong would it be? Could he surpass the great sage? Only the great sage Acheron knew the extent of Lord Go's strength. Like him, Lord Go was also a 9-revolution great sage. In the netherworld, the 9-revolution great sage was already the peak of strength. Back then, old Hades was comparable to Lord Go. Of course, the 9 old fellows of the 9 nether prison clans were also in the 9-revolution great sage realm. This realm was already the strongest in this world. But even so, they were still in the realm of the great sage. Was there any realm above the realm of the great sage that they didn't know? Of course, the great sage Acheron knew that there was a boundless starry sky and a real great world beyond the netherworld. There should be existences beyond the level of the great sage in those great worlds. The goal of the old fellows of the 9 nether prison clans was to integrate the small worlds around the netherworld and make it one of the great world. In this way, the 9 old fellows of the 9 nether prison clans would be able to come into contact with other great world. Then, they would be able to step into a higher realm. Of course, if Bufang's wine could help them break through, it would save them a lot of effort. Therefore, the great sage Acheron was very curious and even had a little expectation in his heart. Gulp! Lord Go blinked his dog eyes and twitched his nose. He drank a cup of wine and lay on the ground. The whole restaurant was very quiet. No one spoke. One could hear a pin drop. Everyone stared at the Lord Go, looking forward to the signs of a breakthrough in Lord Go. Burp! A long time later, Lord Go opened his mouth and bellowed. The strong smell of wine spread. Lord Go smacked his lips and sighed regretfully. The wine is good. What a pity! Lord Go shook his head with a deep look of regret in his eyes. Sure enough, he couldn't break through. The shackles of this world were too strong. Although Bufang's wine was miraculous, it was impossible for it to help the great sage break free. Bufang's wine was like a knife. It could help the great sage cut the shackles, but it was far from being able to cut the cage made of a towering tree. But there's a surprise. Lord Go's nose was full of the smell of wine as he grinned. When the great sage Acheron found that Lord Go couldn't break through, he was filled with regret. He heaved a long sigh. Sure enough, he couldn't do it. He smiled bitterly. He couldn't believe that he could pin his hopes on a mere jar of wine. However, when he sensed Lord Go's aura, the great sage Acheron shook off his resentment. The wine wasn't useless. It actually helped the mangy dog recover completely. The pressure emanating from the mangy dog's body was faintly terrifying to him. This dog swallowed so much of the will of the great path. It's really a way. Should I learn from him and eat some of the will of the great path? The great sage Acheron held the jade jar that was as big as a fist, his eyes shining. After thinking about it, he decided not to. Although the great sage was strong, the backlash from the will of the great path wasn't something to be trifled with. I'm a little tired. Lord Go, I'm going to sleep for a while. Lord Go's nose twitched. He looked at Bufang and said. Bufang nodded. Then, Lord Dog turned around and walked toward the path understanding tree with clumsy cat-like step. In the end, he laid down under the path understanding tree and fell into a deep sleep. Bufang felt a little regretful. The top-grade Acheron's helplessness wine could help the great sage break through. However, it couldn't help the Lord Go at all. If that was the case, the Lord Go's cultivation base could be at the 9-revolution great sage, which meant that he was at the peak of the great sage realm. Bufang had an idea. After such a long time, he finally got the dog's cultivation base. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. Great sage Acheron were leaving first, although Yuji and Luoji had a little desire for Bufang's wine. Looking at Hades' era, who was as drunk as a dead pig, they decided to bring him back to the Hades Palace. If the dignified Nether King were to embarrass himself, that would be fun. Great sage Acheron nodded. Yu-ji and Luo-ji took Hades, soaring into the sky. Spicy strips, eyes spicy strips, eyes spicy strips, spicy strips, come back. In the sky, Hades' Era, who was being carried by Yu-ji and Luo-ji, was startled. He reached out his hand and screamed. Bufang looked at Hades' Era, the corners of his mouth twitching. Your spicy strips? Haha! Bufang's face made Yu, who was standing next to him, shiver. She always felt that after Hades' Era woke up, he would be exploited by Bufang. Do you want to drink? Bufang covered the jar, glancing at Great Sage Acheron in the distance. Great Sage Acheron looked at the fist-sized jar in his hand, then at the giant jar by Bufang. His nostrils flared and his eyes narrowed. Then, he threw out a bag of nether crystals. Come, give this sage a jar. Yellow Spring Great Sage sat in a chair, carefully hiding his wine jar, and said in a lavish manner. Yu was bewildered. Great Sage Acheron, don't you have one? Yu asked skeptically. This sage doesn't want to drink it. Little girl, do you know that the more wine is stored, the better it becomes? I want to hold this jar for 10,000 years. Great Sage Acheron said seriously. You held Little Hu bewildered. You're right. Little Hu and I didn't know what to say. Okay. Bufang agreed with Great Sage Acheron's idea. Indeed, the longer he kept his wine, the better it became. However, the way he kept it was a problem. He poured a glass of wine for Great Sage Acheron. After a while, another drunkard appeared in the restaurant. I'm with you. Years ago, when I entered the abyss, I didn't get drunk even after 1,000 cups. I tasted the 3 great wines of the abyss one by one. Now that I think about it, I can't remember. Little girl, I'm with you. When that boy Tiantsang came to me, Great Sage Acheron's face was flushed. He pulled you to sit at the table, his breath reeking of wine. You had no choice but to give him an awkward but polite smile. As for Little Hu, who was in Yu's arms, he pinched his nose with a disgusted look on his face. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. It seemed that the supreme grade Acheron's helplessness wine was really strong. The great sage would get drunk after drinking it. He would pass out after 1 cup. Bufang thought to himself. No wonder the system provided such a small cup. If it were in a bowl, he would be drunk to death after drinking a bowl of wine. At this moment, outside the restaurant, a group of people was already very restless. They could not believe that the wine in the restaurant could help the great sage break through. Although it was useless for Earth Prison Dog and Great Sage Acheron to drink it, however, how could they be compared with the two? Earth Prison Dog and Great Sage Acheron were the best in the whole netherworld. If the Great Sage could break through after drinking it, wouldn't their little saint ascend to heaven after drinking it? As soon as this thought came to their minds, everyone exploded. No, I must have a taste of this fine wine. I'll drink it even if I'm dead. I'll drink it even if I have to go bankrupt. Go back and report to the family. Ask them to prepare nether crystals. 1 million for a cup. It's so king expensive. Many experts of the aristocratic families and clans had the same thought. Then, the line in front of the restaurant dispersed. 1 million nether crystals. Basically, no one would bring so many nether crystals with them. Of course, unless it was the Great Sage. Without the Great Sage present, 1 million nether crystals was already a huge sum of money. After all, 1 million nether crystals was the entire wealth of a small aristocratic family. In the Hades Palace, a rumbling sound immediately rang out in the sky. Earth Prison's will of the Great Path swept over, and a terrible pressure enveloped the whole Hades Palace. Rumble! Outside the tightly closed Hades Palace, Tai stared at the changes in the sky with a dull face, feeling incredulous. What was happening? Was His Excellency Hades about to break through again? With Lord Netherking's temperament of slacking off every few days, how could he break through so frequently? What was going on with this world? On the other side, It was prison overlord Inglong's mansion. A terrible will of the Great Path was spreading in the sky there as well. The rumbling roars were deafening. The two great sage broke through at the same time. What the hell was going on? Tai felt that he was out of touch with this world. The sound of thunder was deafening. On this day, the whole nether prison was enveloped in a sea of thunder. The great sage's breakthrough was very powerful, and the last time a great sage broke through was already a few thousand years ago. It was not easy for the great sage to break through. In the cave of the fallen gods, a forbidden land, a golden skeleton stood outside the cave with blood-colored ghostly fire surging in its hollow eyes. It's that old fellow Inglong who broke through. His talent is basically at its limit, and his body can't take it if he wants to break through at such an old age. But now he's making a strange breakthrough? There must be something strange about it. Tian Sung's boy has just passed the Demon King Pass, but now he's breaking through again. This time, without the Demon King Pass to shield him from the heavenly secrets, he's making quite a scene. I'm afraid this will attract Nether Prison's attention. Buzz, in the cave of the fallen gods, a silver skeleton walked out. Go to the Hades Palace and find out what's going on. Why is the great sage breaking through so frequently? The golden skeleton said. The blue ghostly fire in the silver skeleton's eyes flashed, and then it disappeared. The Black Temple. A mass of pitch-black smoke hovered over the top of the palace. A pair of scarlet eyes emerged from the black gas. Unbelievable! That old dragon Inglong has had a second spring? How can he break through at such an old age? What's the reason? Something's wrong. There must be something wrong. We have to send someone to find out. Goddess City. Empress Bai Luo was sitting in Fong Fong's ice cream store, eating a chocolate cake and drinking a delicious pearl milk tea. She sat in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, her bright red dress spread out, and her straight and fair long legs were stretched out. Through the transparent floor-to-ceiling window, she looked quite beautiful. Many women in Goddess City had their eyes glued to this scene. Suddenly King Biluo, who had sucked a pearl, froze. A gentle and beautiful woman in a plain white dress sat opposite her. It was the High Priestess. Your Majesty, the Lord has sent a message. He wants us to find out the secret of Inglong's second spring and report it to the Lord as soon as possible. The High Priestess spoke, her voice soft and gentle. However, his words caused Empress Bai Luo's expression to become strange. That old man Inglong has had a second spring? He's so old and he can still find a female dragon? King Biluo scooped a big mouthful of chocolate and stuffed it into her mouth, looking at the High Priestess in confusion. The High Priestess' mouth twitched. No. Inglong has had a breakthrough. The Lord wants us to find out the reason. It's unbelievable that Inglong could break through. The Lord feels that there's something strange about it. Oh, I knew it. There's actually a female dragon who would take a fancy to that old Inglong. I'll make arrangements after I finish my afternoon tea, Empress Bai Luo said. The Lord wants your Majesty to go personally. The High Priestess was very serious. King Biluo was stunned. Oh, okay. In the distance, Your Majesty, the matcha-flavored ice cream you ordered is ready, Jing Yuan's soft and beautiful voice rang out. Ah, coming. King Biluo chewed the cake, her big red lips licking the milky white cream on it. Holding the milk tea, she stood up. The High Priestess looked at King Biluo's back, the corner of her mouth twitched. Your Majesty, the dessert is delicious, but you have to control yourself. Inglong and Hades broke through at the same time. For a moment, the entire Earth prison changed. The great sage's breakthrough naturally had an extraordinary impact. The aristocratic families were in an uproar. The big city was in an uproar. The forbidden lands were in an uproar. Even Nether Prison was a little dumbfounded. Acheron's little store. It was late at night. The door of the restaurant was closed with a creak. The restaurant was ablaze with lights. Bufang sat at the dining table. On the table was a jade jar, which was the supreme-grade Acheron's wine of helplessness. You left. She went to borrow money from her sister. Opening the lid, the aroma of the wine wafted out. Bufang poured a cup of wine. Bufang was dazzled by the sight of the colorful wine swirling around him. He took a deep breath, and the wine aroma drilled into his nose. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched, and he put the cup in front of his mouth. Chapter 13:10. In the dead of night, the bright moon hung high in the sky. In Acheron's little restaurant in Forbidden Soul City, the restaurant was brightly lit. There were few people in the restaurant, and the leaves of the path understanding tree were rustling and swaying. Lord Go was lying under the path understanding tree, snoring softly. What came out of his mouth and nostrils was extremely rich nether energy. You, on the other hand, went to Yuchi. In addition to borrowing money, she also went to chat with you. After all, Yuchi is your elder sister. This time, you also had to pay for the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness. Although the other dishes could be free, the system was very firm this time. No matter who it was, except Bufang himself, as long as they wanted a glass of wine, they had to pay. It was the same even for those close to Bufang, such as Lord Go and you. But Bufang didn't care about it. With Lord Go's strength, it was easy for him to get 1,000,000 nether crystals. Besides, with Lord Go's character, he had emptied the treasures of many experts. It was a piece of cake for him to gather 1,000,000 nether crystals. As for you, Yuchi, as a prison overlord and your elder sister, could naturally gather 1,000,000 nether crystals. Therefore, Bufang didn't think too much about it. In the restaurant today, in addition to Lord Go, there was only Bufang. Holding a glass of wine, Bufang stared at the supreme-grade Acheron helplessness in front of him, his eyes flashing. He knew that the wine had little effect on him and could hardly help him break through, but Bufang still wanted to have a glass of it. Take it as a fee for the hard work of making this wine. The supreme-grade yellow spring helplessness wine had a rainbow-colored liquid. It was bright and beautiful, and the liquid swayed endlessly within it. Bufang held the glass and brought it to his mouth. With a gulp, he poured it into his mouth. As soon as it entered his mouth, it tasted spicy. That's right, it was spicy. That kind of spiciness seemed to be burning his scalp numb. Like a whirlwind, it instantly engulfed his entire body. Then, the mellowness of the wine exploded. He thought that a glass of wine wouldn't be a lot. However, when it entered his mouth, that sliver of wine seemed to instantly swell up and turn into a surging river. The wine that was originally flowing in his mouth was surging and surging. That feeling was indescribable. It was the best wine Bufang had ever tasted. Even if it was just for the taste, it was worth 1,000,000 per cup. Bufang pursed his lips. The taste of the wine was still lingering in his mouth, making him frown as he savored the taste and the taste of the wine. Lord Go, who was lying under the path understanding tree, opened his sleepy eyes and looked at Bufang, who had just drunk a glass of wine. His dog eyes revealed a mocking expression. Bufang blushed. In an instant it turned red. He opened his mouth and exhaled slightly. Shaking his head, he felt the world was spinning. No wonder even the great sage couldn't resist this glass of wine. The strength of the wine was indeed extraordinary. Bufang sucked in a breath of cold air. Standing up, his body was limp, when Lord Go saw Bufang's appearance. He grinned as if he was silently laughing at him. Of course, at this moment, Bufang couldn't see Lord Go's sneer. Bufang felt the world was spinning, and all kinds of scenes appeared in front of him. This scene caused his eyes to widen. He saw skyscrapers, endless streams of traffic, and the surging flames of food being stir-fried in the kitchen. This familiar scene made Bufang a little dazed. It seemed to be scenes from his previous life on Earth. Bufang was bewildered. He leaned against the wall and walked upstairs. After a while, he actually climbed into his own room. Reeking of wine, he lay on the bed and fell asleep. The next day at dawn, the sun hung high in the sky, shining down. In front of Acheron's little store, a group of people stared at the closed door, exchanging glances. The people present were all experts from influential families and clans who had traveled thousands of miles to come here. They had all prepared 1,000,000 nether crystals just for a glass of wine today. However, when the sun was high in the sky, the restaurant's door was still closed. What was going on? Why isn't it open yet? Didn't they say the restaurant is open for 6 hours a day? It's been half a day. If it doesn't open now, it's going to be dark. The owner doesn't keep his word. The group of experts from the aristocratic families in front of the door chattered non-stop, whispering to each other. However, no one knew what was going on. They knocked on the door, but there was no response. They wanted to force their way in, but when they remembered that the restaurant seemed to be guarded by Earth Prison Dog, they gave up the idea. Everyone's heart was itching. The main reason was that they couldn't wait to get their hands on the wine. Since the wine could improve the cultivation base of experts like the Great Sage, it was naturally more effective for little saints like them. Since they had to wait in line, they could only wait in line. As a result, an interesting scene took place in Forbidden Soul City. The heads of prominent aristocratic families in the major cities of Earth Prison were all waiting in line quietly in front of a small restaurant. When the residents of Forbidden Soul City saw this scene, they all felt incredulous and pointed their fingers at them. The heads of the aristocratic families felt their faces burning. Since when had they been treated like animals by the crowd? However, for the sake of the wine, they endured it. This wait lasted for an entire night. The bright moon hung high in the sky once again. In the sky, the disk-like moon cast specks of light down. The cold moonlight sprinkled down as if covering the earth with silver frost. The heads of the aristocratic families in line were so bored that they sat cross-legged on the ground, their hands trembling. They were waiting anxiously. Let's go, let's go. It seems that we won't open for business today. What a waste of my time. They're just putting on airs. The heads of the aristocratic families were all fuming, but they had no choice but to leave. At this moment, the news from the restaurant spread like wildfire throughout Earth Prison. Rumble. After a day, the Great Sage's tribulation slowly came to an end. The experts of the Forbidden Lands, who had been paying attention to the lightning tribulation, withdrew their gazes. In the Hades Palace, Hades Era grinned. Feeling the skyrocketing power in his body, he couldn't close his mouth from ear to ear. It was not a loss to buy a breakthrough with 1,000,000 nether crystals. Bufang was very reasonable. 1,000,000 nether crystals was not a loss, nor could he be fooled. Hades Era was overjoyed. He rummaged in the Hades Palace, collected another 1,000,000 nether crystals, and prepared to ask Bufang for a glass of wine again. As for what he did and said when he was drunk, he had selectively forgotten them. When he woke up, he was still wondering why his spicy strips were gone. In Yinglong's residence, Yinglong slowly opened his eyes. His body was surrounded by lightning bolts, and his aura had increased several times. He looked extremely terrifying. Roar! A dragon roar rang out. Yinglong's body suddenly rose and soared into the sky. The next moment, he turned into a huge Yinglong that blotted out the sky. It was Yinglong's body. He had the body of a divine dragon, but he had a pair of wings on his back. The scales on his body glowed with a dark golden luster. Roar! The dragon roar kept spreading, as if resounding through the whole Earth Prison. He was so excited. At his age, he didn't expect that he could break through because of a glass of wine. It was a wonderful feeling. The wine was worth it. Yinglong transformed back into his human form. Holding the hollow ice stick, his eyes were full of surprise and excitement. He turned to look in the direction of Forbidden Soul City. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, he didn't go there immediately. Instead, he calmed down and began to consolidate his cultivation base. At this moment, all the Forbidden Lands in Earth Prison had received the news from their subordinate. The breakthroughs of Yinglong and Hades' era were all because of a glass of wine. A glass of wine from a small restaurant in Forbidden Soul City. The news even reached the Nether Prison. Of course, the experts of Nether Prison, who were celebrating the Netherworld's tournament of the Great Path, scoffed at the news, thinking it was deliberately made up by Earth Prison to get back at them. So they didn't take it seriously. However, the Forbidden Lands in Earth Prison didn't think so. All the Forbidden Lands sent their experts out of their Forbidden Lands and headed for Forbidden Soul City. They were all ordered to bring back a glass of wine. Each of them had millions of nether crystals, and they had come with a huge sum of money. Whether the rumor was true or not, if there was really such a wine, it wouldn't hurt to have a taste. So, the whole Earth Prison was in an uproar, and all the powers were in an uproar. One expert after another was sent to Forbidden Soul City. After the semifinals of the Netherworld's Tournament of the Great Path, the once quiet and remote city became lively again. Bufang opened his eyes. He yawned. His clothes were a little messy, and his hair was disheveled, but he felt as if his whole body and heart had become much clearer. Oh, my cultivation base. That gave Bufang pause, and then he sensed his own strength. There used to be only one spinning vortex in his spirit sea, but now there were two. Did this mean that his strength had stepped into the realm of the two-revolution little saint? Didn't they say that dishes were ineffective for improving his cultivation base? Bufang was amazed. Who would have thought that a cup of wine would actually allow him to achieve a breakthrough in his cultivation? However, a breakthrough in cultivation was a good thing, and Bufang would have more confidence. He felt his messy body. Bufang stepped into the bathroom. Hualalad hot water sprayed out from the nozzle, and the clear water filled the entire bathroom with hot air. The dim yellow light illuminated the atmosphere in the bathroom, making the atmosphere feel a little lazy. After taking a shower, Bufang walked out of the bathroom. She was wearing a bathrobe and her hair was wet, with water droplets dripping down from her head. Her bathrobe was unbuttoned, revealing her fair chest. Bufang wiped his hair, but it was still a little wet. However, Bufang didn't bother with him anymore. The vermilion robe was on the boat, and the scorching sun was high in the sky. It was time to open the shop. This sleep was really comfortable. Bufang felt that his mental strength seemed to have improved a little because of this sleep. He walked down the stairs. He came to the kitchen. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes twinkled. Bufang patted Xiao Bai's small belly. "Another beautiful day," Bufang said with an expressionless face. He practiced his knife skills in the kitchen for a while. Then, he came to the restaurant. "Bufang boy, you're awake." Lord Go was lying under the path understanding tree, seeing Bufang's wet hair. The dog's mouth twitched, saying playfully, "I slept for a long time, but the taste of the wine is really good. No wonder it's a wine brewed with the 9 leaves acheron grass." Bufang nodded. He didn't hear the mockery in Lord Go's words. Perhaps he had done something inappropriate when he was drunk, which made Lord Go think so. At this time, he could only stay calm. His face was expressionless, so he wouldn't look embarrassed. Creak. Bufang opened the door of the restaurant. The sunlight shone through the door. It projected onto the ground. Bufang slightly narrowed his eyes. It was because he was hit by the dazzling sunlight. It's quite lively. Everyone is here so early. Bufang glanced at the long line outside the door, slightly startled. Then, he said expressionlessly, outside the door, the heads of the aristocratic families, who had waited until the flowers withered, saw Bufang open the door. They had an urge to cry, "Early? Early my ass! We've been waiting outside for a day and a night." A head of an aristocratic family widened his bloodshot eyes, which looked extremely terrifying and ferocious. A day and a night? Bufang was stunned. Then, he seemed to remember something. A strange expression appeared on his face. He drank a glass of wine and slept for a day and a night? Didn't he just sleep for a night? No wonder Lord Go looked at him with such a strange expression. Line up in an orderly manner. The restaurant is open now, Bufang said with an expressionless face. Then, he turned and walked into the restaurant. The heads of the aristocratic families looked at each other and then at Bufang's back. They felt a toothache when they saw Bufang's calm look. Isn't this guy embarrassed at all after sleeping for a day and a night? But now was not the time to think about this problem. The heads of the aristocratic families crazily squeezed into the restaurant. Line up in an orderly manner. Don't push. Bufang stood at the door of the kitchen, turned his head to look at the group of people in front of the door, and said lightly. Outside Forbidden Soul City, a mass of black smoke floated in the air. A figure could be vaguely seen in it. The person whom Boss asked to assassinate seems to be this chef, right? The black figure pondered for a while. Assassinate him before, and now he's asking for a glass of wine. It feels very awkward. Boss really doesn't consider our feelings when he does things. Crack, crack, the ground cracked open, and one skeleton after another crawled out of it and swarmed toward Forbidden Soul City. The eyes of these skeletons flickered with eerie blue ghostly flames. A silver skeleton stood at the head of these skeletons. At this moment, it was raising a hand and stroking its chin. Apparently, it was also thinking. Suddenly, the ghostly flames in the silver skeleton's eye sockets flickered. When it saw a mass of black smoke hovering in the sky, its ghostly flames suddenly became sharp. The skeletons of the Cave of the Fallen Gods, the guys from the Black Temple, the two seemed to be at odds with each other. Suddenly, their expressions changed at the same time. In the distance, on the horizon, a figure dressed in a bright red robe strode forward with long legs, swaying his hips as he walked over. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.